Okay, you guys ready? Yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm going to call the special meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Alborn?
Here.
Commissioner Allen?
Here.
Commissioner Karapetkoff?
Here.
Commissioner Locke?
Here.
And Chair LePage.
Here. Okay, I want to welcome you all today. The first item on our agenda are the public appearances. Any member of the public can speak to the Planning Commission at this time on any matters of municipal concern which are not on our agenda tonight. These items will not have discussion, but they may be agendized for a future agenda. And I'll remind everybody that we are in accord with the Brown Act. We're under that governance, so I ask you all to please abide by that. So any members of the public who may speak to us at this time about any items which are not on the agenda tonight. Anybody in the chamber want to come up? Anybody, any hands up online, Shelby?
No, sir.
Okay, no public appearances. No announcements, I assume, from staff. All right. That brings us to the public hearings. The first item is the only item. This is a design review and use permit 25313 and 25314. This is the Verizon Sequoia deployment. Can we have a staff report, please?
One moment while we get the screen set up. Oh. Good evening, Commissioners. As discussed, we're reviewing the proposed small wireless facility by Sequoia Deployment Services on behalf of Verizon. That is Design Review 25313 and Use Permit 25314. Some of these slides will be familiar. Just for quick background, here is the proposed site for the small wireless facility. This is our first application since the adoption of our 2023 wireless ordinance for a type 1 through 4 facility. We have seen type 5 facilities in the past. The site is located in the public right-of-way on Carmelo. The existing utility pole is just shy of 39 feet, and this is a type 3 application for a wireless facility on a replacement pole in the right-of-way. Again, these are familiar. The pole itself is going to be replaced to be 46 feet 4 inches tall. The top of the antenna height will be 49 feet 10 inches. It's a PG&E pole that's being replaced in the same location with a just under 3 cubic foot antenna, and the pole-mounted equipment will be 16.48 cubic feet asterisk. We'll come back to that later. Here's just a brief meeting timeline and next steps. We met first on the 21st to hear this project, and it was continued to a later date due to the large amount of volume of materials submitted by concerned residents, the applicant, and we wanted to properly address the comments and concerns that were raised in those before that meeting. We were continued to the February 4th date, but again, continued the meeting because there was additional large amounts of materials that were submitted to the city, and staff did not have the appropriate amount of time to address all the concerns and questions raised. We're now here at the February 10th meeting, where we're going to be reviewing the project again and going over those comments and questions. And finally, the shot clock, which is the mandated time for review for wireless facilities, ends on March 5th after there was a tolling agreement that the city and Verizon agreed to. So we've received a large amount of neighbor correspondence. I tried to briefly summarize them, but you should have received all of the correspondence forwarded to you and attached to the agenda from both the previous meeting and the current meeting and the other previous meeting. Just to synopsize, there's a lot of concerns about aesthetics with the size of the equipment, the effects on neighborhood character, the increase in height. Many people raised concerns over property values. There were some people that brought health concerns regarding the radio frequency emissions. There's concerns raised about the exceptions that the applicant requested, specifically the placement of a facility in the right-of-way in the R1 zone and within the center line of a facade window. People have raised view concerns / view impact concerns. Many residents stated that they already had good signal and that these facilities were not needed. People did express concerns over noise. There was residents and concerned individuals that raised concerns over the actual coverage gap itself, the effect on an adjacent historic home, potential future expansions, and whether or not this site counts as a stealth facility. So applicant compliance and neighbor concerns. For the pole replacement, we talked about this briefly last time. The pole itself is less than 10 feet in the increase, but the total height of the top of the antenna will increase the pole by more than 10 feet. There are certain requirements for distance between an antenna and the primary power lines at the top of a PG&E pole of 6 feet. Right now, the plans are showing 6 feet, 6 inches of clearance. I have talked to the applicant briefly, and they said they should be able to potentially saw down the top of the pole 6 inches to make it so it would be that minimum 6 feet clearance, which could get 6 inches reduced off the top of the height. But if that's something that's interests you guys, we can add a special condition specifically requiring that. For the accessory equipment, this is where that asterisk comes back into play. We have a preference in our administrative design guidelines to have equipment undergrounded, but the applicant presented us their concerns regarding that would be that there would need to be access to that equipment. The PG&E meter would need to be on a pedestal adjacent to it, and that would require bollards, curb, gutters, and would take away valuable street parking. So the pole-mounted equipment would be, the next tier up would be 6 cubic feet or less, and the applicant indicated that they couldn't shrink their accessory equipment down to 6 cubic feet. The next cap is a maximum of 17 cubic feet. So as the equipment is presented currently in the plans, it shows 16.48 cubic feet of accessory equipment, but that does not include, there's a part of the standoff from where the bracket with the equipment and the pole is covered by the shroud extends out to cover that void, that empty space. So if the planning commission can determine whether they view that shrouded empty space as accessory equipment, those wings or flaps, as they've been referred to, can be removed, so that would lower the appearance, some of the voluminous appearance. And then in addition to that, they did not calculate the cubic footage of the antenna or the accessory equipment brackets. The accessory equipment brackets, I have a slide coming up that will look at these things specifically, so we can go into more detail there. With regards to stealth, there's been concerns raised that this isn't a stealth facility. The issue here is if someone looked at this pole in the future, just a regular person with no, would they see this as a utility pole still, or would they see this as a wireless site? The city is under of the opinion that with the painting the equipment to match the pole and having the shrouding, that it is a stealth facility. But that's something for you guys to contemplate and think about. There's also concerns about future eligible facilities requests. This is a procedure for modifications to existing wireless facilities that allows for a certain amount of expansion of a facility as long as a concealment element isn't defeated if it is a stealth facility. Right now, any future EFRs would be is speculative. We don't have anything in front of us for that currently, and so it's not part of the consideration of this project. For noise, we've confirmed, and there's a noise acoustic analysis that was provided with the application, that all the equipment is cooled passively and there's no fans and the equipment won't be generating any noise. With regards to trees and landscaping, this is a point that has there's been many concerns raised about this, that the code itself says that you can't place new poles in a tree drip line. The code specifies there's a difference between new, replacement, and existing poles. Verizon is proposing to go on a replacement PG&E utility pole, but it is important to note that that replacement of the pole is something that's handled by PG&E under a separate application. So I think that's why there's differentiation between an existing, new, and replacement pole, and specifically for the drip line, no new poles, because PG&E replaces poles adjacent to trees frequently. So The code itself only refers to new poles, but out of an abundance of caution, because it is in the strip line, we added special condition 3 requiring a landscape management plan prior to building permit issuance to make sure that we scrutinized as much as we could any work that was done in the strip line. With regards to property values, the code specifically states that if the only mention in the wireless code regarding property values is that if the site meets the design guidelines and municipal code standards, that the site won't have any effect on property values. Visual impact, there's currently an existing utility pole here, and I have some slides that show pictures that were presented by residents showing the existing utility pole. So you can extrapolate what it'll look like with the photo sims we saw earlier from those pictures. Currently, there's an existing utility pole, and it doesn't appear that any the increase in height or the added equipment will have any visual impact on the surrounding homes. And part of the property value section of the municipal code also states that by following the standards and guidelines for wireless facilities, it won't have any visual impacts or property value impacts. So for accessory equipment, I wanted to give the more detailed diagrams from the plans so you could see what I was referring to for the flaps. On the first diagram, you can see I've highlighted in yellow. That is the standoff space between the pole and the accessory equipment that is required by PG&E. The applicant has proposed to extend their shroud towards the pole to cover up that space. They're not currently counting that space between the pole and the equipment as part of the cubic volume for the accessory equipment. So if the planning commission determines that that should be included, or that they prefer that the flaps and wings are removed so that it is not shrouded and it is just instead open space, that's something that we can condition the project with. And then additionally, and if so, we would need to see the cubic volume of that and make sure that the site maintains that below 17 cubic feet volume of accessory equipment. The next slide is, I tried to gather as many of the shots from neighboring properties that had concerns about the view impacts of the pole. So you can see all the different windows, doors, and front patios that people can see the existing utility pole from. And you have to use your imagination a little bit, but we saw the photo sims earlier. I'm not enough of a Photoshop wizard to put the sims into these photos, but you can imagine the pole being about 8 feet taller with the 3'10" on top. And with the equipment, which would be approximately right here in this photo. Laser pointer. Right here, on the side of the pole, where this tree is here, where these branches that would need to be trimmed. So, we have received additional information from the applicants regarding the site. They did an analysis. One of the largest things that we got comments on, or at least the most analysis we received from both the applicant and concerned residents, was about the feasibility of the Golden Bough Theater. It was called into question the design that was shown in the original PeerCon report that used the equipment that you typically see on a small wireless facility as opposed to a macro site. So PeerCon created some parameters to make a larger pole or larger antennas that would be higher up. That would be panel antennas instead of omnidirectional. And so they provided these dimensions and said that, well, through modeling, it shows that this would address the coverage gap. They had concerns about the proposed trees on site and concluded that the Golden Bough Theater is not a feasible or equivalent to the proposed site. So that's something that you guys will be reviewing today to determine if you believe that the Golden Bough is a feasible alternative technically. This is the associated picture. So you can see there's the Golden Bough Theater. The blue lines show, I believe, the center of where they'd want to be shooting, and the red shows the total beam width, but I will let the applicant speak more on that because I'm no technical expert myself. CTC, the city's engineering consultant, did a review of the PeerCon report and did some of their own modeling for the proposed macro facility on top of Golden Bough Theater, and they concluded fairly similar to PeerCon. They stated that the modeling shows that this would address the coverage gap, but there would need to be field verification. So Right now, there are trees next to the Golden Bough on the west side of the theater that PureCon is saying could cause attenuation of the antenna and disrupt the signal. CTC confirmed that the modeling shows it would work, but that you need to verify how the trees would affect the signal. And here's the coverage, the rough coverage map based off the modeling that CTC did. And here's just some quotes from the report, but it basically says what I just said, that it would, that the residents engineering consultant confirmed that there need to be some field testing done, but that the macro facility appears that it would address the coverage gaps just based off modeling. There may be some concerns about trees, but this is also just a review of the mid-band frequencies and didn't include any C-band analysis. So we get to the required findings. A denial of its application would result in effective prohibition or otherwise violate federal law, or a denial of this application would violate state law. This is one of the cruxes, because this is one of the required findings for the special exceptions that the applicant is requesting. So whether or not they make this finding will have kind of cascading effects on the rest of the findings for the project. Because if the special exceptions can't be found, then the site would be found not to meet the other standards because of the placement of the proposed small wireless facility. So I got some notes just to get a little more detailed in this for you guys, because these are findings that you'll have to make if you would want to adopt the resolution of denial. And so that's test one, is the significant gap for the effective prohibition. There's two tests. One is significant gap, least intrusive means. So that is the gap that's being shown by Verizon / Sequoia Deployment Services, a significant gap. And is the proposed site the least intrusive means to address that coverage gap? So what that means for you guys is to determine whether you believe that the Golden Bough Theater is a technically feasible alternative, and is it less intrusive? Based off of the cursory analysis that staff did, based off the limited information that we had, it appears that the most exceptions that would be needed for the Golden Bough Theater would be one, for the height, because they show the center line of the antennas would be 34 feet. And when you're putting a wireless facility on a private parcel, you're allowed to go 10 feet above the maximum allowed height. Maximum allowed height is 34 feet. So they're showing the center line of the antenna, which is the midpoint of the antenna. So if it's a 6-foot antenna, the max height would be 37 feet. So they could request a special exception for height, but that would only be one, while the small wireless facility is requesting 2 special exceptions. Now, for material inhibits, that's the second test for an effective prohibition, and that would be, would the denial of this application materially inhibit the applicant's ability to compete in a fair and balanced regulatory environment, considering all circumstance, which is technical feasibility, least intrusive, reasonable cost, and timely delays. And then the other, that would be the federal law we were looking at. If we're looking at the state law, would it violate state law for the Public Utility Codes 7901, which would be, does it incommode the public's access to the right-of-way? So we've laid this out. These would be the 3 standards that we'd have to find, because Verizon made points that, or Sequoia Deployment on behalf of Verizon, made points that it would be an effective prohibition of service, it would be materially inhibit their ability to deploy in a fair environment, and it would violate the state law. So we left these blanks for you in the resolution, because these findings, if we were to deny, need to be met. So I've provided some examples here that the applicant has shown there's a significant gap, but you don't believe that the proposed site is the least intrusive means, because you believe that the Golden Bough Theater is a technically feasible location for them to site that would be less intrusive. For the material inhibits, it would be that, again, the Golden Bough is a technically and economically feasible location for the carriers to deploy. And then finally, it would be that the R1, placing the utility pole, the height of it would violate the applicant's, it wouldn't violate the applicant's franchise right to deploy in the right-of-way. So I'll go over this, but I'll have Anna right here in case I misspeak at all. So the Carmel Municipal Code outlines that the Planning Commission shall adopt bylaws, policies, rules, and procedures for how the Planning Commission operates for a myriad of different things. Specifically, we're focusing on the Planning Commission Rules and Procedures, Section 2K1, A, B, C, and E. A states that a quorum for the Planning Commission would be 3 members, except for when reviewing use permits, in which case a quorum is 4 members. It also states that the majority of the commission present you need the majority of the commission present to take any action, except for use permits again, which require 4 members to take any affirmative vote requires 4 members. And then this ties into E, where a tie vote would be a failed motion. And if we refer back to B, anything that's not in that gets the necessary 4 votes for approval is deemed denied due to a lack of necessary votes. So for approving this site today, you need 4 votes of approval. Anything less than that would be deemed a denial due to not having the necessary number of votes. So with that, staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt resolution attachment number 2. And I did get a note from Brian today that I made an error in the staff report. In the staff report, I've referred to the resolution that we prepped for denial as resolution attachment 1, when it's actually attachment 2. So it's correct in the slides, but there is an error in the staff report. So I just wanted to make sure there's no confusion for anyone that read the report and was wondering why the attachments were different. And we would have to, you'd adopt the resolution as presented by staff with the modifications required for making those findings for denial and those blank spaces we left in the resolution. Alternatively, if the Planning Commission finds that the applicant has met the burden of compliance with the CMC and the special exceptions, you can adopt attachment 1, which is a resolution of approval for the facility. That concludes my presentation, and I will be here for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for staff at this time from the commissioners? Question?
Yeah, hi Jake. Can you pull up the CTC report from January 21st meeting?
I can indeed. Oh.
And then do we
Yes.
have the CTC representative on the phone?
We do.
Okay.
Yes, he's on Zoom and he can answer any questions. Let me just close out of this. And you wanted the original CTC report.
Yeah.
And then was there a specific page you wanted me to go to?
There was. If we could scroll down, I just get so confused with the data, so keep scrolling. I just had a couple questions about some of the things in this report that I just wanted to ask because I was curious. Keep going.
Was it a table or a map that you were looking for?
So we're gonna go back up to that table, but first we're gonna scroll down and we're gonna go right there. Let's see, number 5. Oh, no, keep one more page. Keep going. Should have a 5 in front of it. There we go, up there. Okay, so I just had a question because in this, he talks about this area, right, bounded by Ocean Avenue, Scenic, and Mission. And then he says an area of slightly over 3 square miles. How is that possible? Aren't we just 1 square mile?
I'll let Lee speak on any numbers in
Okay.
his report.
Okay.
Just let me go. Can you hear me from here?
Yep.
Good. That's a good thing. That's a good question. The area, I took that data actually from the report that the applicant area there.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Okay. So if it was expanded to 3 miles, if you scroll up, then you did all of the analytics around 3 square miles instead of 1. And so for me, modeling data around wrong information ugh, I'm not liking this, right? So if you scroll up a little bit further, he references it again, keep going, in this, right here. So he's talking about 3 square miles again. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not even relevant to us, right?
Are you saying the 2.7 miles it says here, or
Yeah, so he's talking about how this performs, and he's taking it out to, actually the 3 miles that is referenced in all of the data.
I think the Founder
That's
Building is the one over
excuse me.
here. So this is the 2.7 miles away, the Founder Building over here.
Right, that's the building, that is the building that we were checking on relative to the interference that came down into the city. Okay, in other words, if you go through the charts there, the actual distances we were talking about were the distance coming down from the Founders Tower, and that's where the interference comes down to the town itself and causes the poor signal to noise quality.
So then that area that you reference that's 3 square miles in section 5.
Let me go back to my report, excuse me. Got too many reports on my own table here. Excuse me, a little confused. Which page are you talking about specifically?
It appears to be page 13 of 28 of the original report.
Okay, which I have handy.
And it's titled, it's 5 Analysis of Existing Verizon Coverage.
Right. This is the chart on 14 where they're showing the area that they traversed with the actually measuring the signal intensity. There are 2 things that were done here. First, they drove around the area that they were interested in finding out what the overall signal quality was. The first thing they did was to go out and in the 3 bands look to see what the signal intensity was. Later on, they went back and analyzed the data because they recorded not just the data itself for the signal strength, but they also recorded the quality of the signal. By quality, I mean what is the actual information coming through and how much is that interference from other sites or noise interference. And so that's how they determined that they had a problem, a coverage problem.
So maybe I'm not getting this, but Carmel-by-the-Sea is 1 square mile.
Right. Okay. We're talking about here, talking about the distance from the site coming down from if you go to my page 17, for example, what you see is that there's the signal quality or having a signal that's reliable varies with the various bands that they use. Okay, and you can see there in the area where it's green, the signal actually was below the blue area, which is the area where we're trying to show where the coverage is. In other words, their minimum target signal is a power of minus 95 dBm. And in the area where it's green in this particular band, it's below that power. So it's not only are we looking at interference, we're also looking at not enough amplitude, not enough power there.
Okay, maybe I should ask it in a different way. Is there equipment that actually covers 1 square mile? Because it looked like in some of your data that most of the equipment goes out, close to a mile. And since Carmel-by-the-Sea is 1 square mile, like, I guess I'm not following.
Okay, the answer is, in the beginning of the report, we talk about that, and typically a small cell, a micro cell serves an area of somewhere in the order of 8/10, 9/10 of a mile, okay? It just so happens, if you go back and look, I didn't realize I had so much paper in my hands here. Let me go back and show you what the problem is here. Actually, we started at the very beginning, so I'm glad to see.
And just to verify, you didn't do any drive testing or anything
I
like that?
did not do any drive. I took the data and used it, and then I went back and verified it using the modeling that I have. Okay, now if you turn to page 8, see what's unusual here is that the site that you have up at Founders Building actually sends the signal strong enough to meet the coverage requirements all this distance, the 2.7 miles. And that's because it's a true line of sight path. And that means that there's very little loss coming there. So this site actually provides service right down on Scenic Drive. And that's where the service is actually coming from. On the other hand, and this is what we were talking about earlier, is if you have some trees in front, well, the signal could only go maybe a couple of 100 feet, 1,000 feet or something like that. So it varies with this high frequency substantially. But in this case, we're actually talking about 2.7 miles, and we're actually saying that down Scenic Drive, if you go through the report in detail, that's exactly where the signal is coming from.
Okay, so when you looked at this, did you look at potentially like from the thought that let's exhaust every other alternative, right? So is there potential to address this so-called gap that we have with like alterations to current sites or re-engineering the approved sites that aren't up and running? Or now obviously we're looking at an alternative site, or even down to, can you change the direction of an antenna and correct this? Because again, we're looking at 1 square mile.
Right, I understand that. If you go back and look at what we were tasked to do, and that was to review the materials provided by the applicant and see if what they have makes sense as far as the design, engineering design. It was not to redesign or come up with other options. We've been doing that after the first round of this, but this report was strictly put together to look at all the details, and I might add, a lot of details were provided here. The engineering study has close to 50 pages and maps, and just to give you an idea, each one of the bands had somewhere in the order of 7,000 measurements made in that band, so it's very comprehensive. So what we did is we went back, we looked at all the information. Was it reasonable? We looked at it, and actually going back, and you'll notice that I went back, or my team, I should say, we went back and actually modeled it to say, because just like you were, I was surprised to see that the signal went out as far as it did. That's a long way for a cell site. But you can see on page 9, we went back and modeled using the technical data they had to see if they were in the same ballpark as the calculation. And the answer was yes. You can see that the signals actually come down that distance. So we're talking coverage there. On one hand, we're talking about coverage down 2 scenic drive there of close to 3 miles, and the next moment we're talking about actual coverage a couple thousand feet. So it does make a tremendous difference.
So I feel like it's a miss on our city, on, our scope of work that was defined for you at the beginning, and probably a learning for our next go-around if we were to face this type of situation again. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? You have a question?
Yeah, I have a CTC question. Yeah, same.
All right, go ahead.
So CTC, have you received any information from the applicant about Franciscan Way, Dolores, and Lasuen, the area down across, around the Carmel Mission?
I only have what's in the actual engineering filing that you've seen there. So to answer your question, I'm not aware if there's any difference. We analyzed the data that we got from the sites that they have. They gave us the information on all the sites that they have, and they also provided us with the Excel files for all the measurements that they took.
Okay, so the white area is not analyzed at all? Okay.
Okay, any more questions? All right, at this time, I'd like to invite the applicant, just a minute, let's let the applicant go first. Let the applicant come forward and make their presentation.
Good afternoon, Paul
And
Albertin.
before we start, I'd like to make your initial comments, limit those to 5 minutes. I'd like the audience to limit their comments to 3 minutes. If you need additional time at the end to answer questions that come up, then I'll grant additional time.
So we had, I apologize, but we had asked through staff and the special counsel if we could have 20 minutes for a presentation. We have 4 people, each with a 5-minute presentation. And we have our expert on the line from New Jersey. We have an expert here who drafted the most recent small cell report on property values. We have Mr. Shubin here to answer the questions about.
So you're requesting 20 minutes for your presentation?
Yeah, we did, I would note that the.
All right, so, all right, 5 minutes per presenter.
Roughly, yes, uh-huh.
All right, thank you.
And we'll try and clip it shorter if we can. Thank you, I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming here now for the 3rd time and your time focused on this application. So I'll jump right in. My name is Paul Albertin. I'm outside counsel for Verizon Wireless. We have Jeremy Stroop and Jay Grundle from Verizon Wireless. They're Verizon Wireless employees are here. Our first speaker is going to be Rich Conroy. He's tuning in right now from New Jersey. He's our expert from PureCon. Second speaker will be David Witkowski from the Silicon Valley Joint Venture. We'll talk about his study of small cell property values. Pete, and then I'll wrap it up and we'll try and do under 20 minutes if we can. So from there, we'll jump right in. Thank you. Rich, you're on.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, terrific. Good evening, commissioners. My name's Richard Conroy. I'm the president of PureCon Solutions. I'm a radio frequency engineer with 38 years experience in wireless network design and performance. And I'm responsible for the engineering evaluation presented to you tonight. The primary technical question before you is whether the Golden Bough rooftop represents a technically viable alternative capable of addressing the documented service gap. Drive testing was performed by PureCon, my company, with calibrated equipment, and it confirmed a measurable service deficiency in this residential coastal neighborhood, particularly for indoor service. A fundamental engineering consideration in this evaluation is going to be proximity. Reliable wireless service begins with proximity. Signal strength diminishes very rapidly with distance, particularly in areas with varied terrain and closely spaced homes, making antenna placement near the serviced area essential for dependable indoor performance. For that reason, proximity becomes a determinative factor in environments such as this one. From an RF engineering perspective, alternative locations must be evaluated on their ability to deliver reliable service close to where it is needed, not simply extend signal over distance. Coverage alone is not the objective. Reliable in-building service is. I have two exhibits here that I want to present. And if I could share my screen, I think I can show them a little better quality. Is that something I can do?
I have them queued up, so you just tell me which exhibits you want to present, and I can get them on the screen for you. Oh, we can share? Oh, never mind. We can set you up for screen sharing, no problem.
Yeah, let me share it this way. I could kind of walk it through with my my mouse and all. So here we go. Let me know if you have that in your view. Can we all see the exhibit?
We're just getting the screen switched over to the Zoom call so that you can share your screen.
Okay.
There we go. It looks like the screen sharing's starting up now.
Okay. So this first exhibit here is a small cell spacing geometry, and what this shows here is this illustrates the relationship between the existing network, the previously approved facilities, the identified service gap, and the candidate locations. At the top of the exhibit here is our existing location, downtown Carmel. Operates on 3 sectors, and its coverage is represented by these 3 colors. All the coverage on this map represents in-building service. So downtown Carmel's contribution to in-building service is the dark green, this dark blue area here, and the pink area. As we move to the south, this South Carmel 3 is a 2-sector site, and its contribution to the in-building service is this small brown area and this dark blue area. And then we have the 2 approved sites, the South Carmel 002 site, which is approved, and its in-building contribution will be the red area that you see on the exhibit. And then to the east is the South Carmel 005, and the light blue color represents what its in-building contribution will be. The gap area, you know, despite these facilities, there still remains a gap area, and this gap area runs along Scenic Road from Ocean Ave all the way down to 13th Ave, come on in Casanova Street into this area. The proposed site located right here in the central portion of the gap area is positioned to close that remaining gap and complete the spacing necessary to function as a network is planned to be designed. The Golden Bow rooftop to the north, shown here where my cursor is, just in between 8th and 9th Ave along Casanova Street, as you can see, is not consistent with the small cell geometry and spacing. It's separated from the core area of requiring service. So now if I turn to Exhibit 2, this shows that in addition to the modeling on that previous map, zoom in on this a little bit. In addition to the modeling, we conducted some field observations to better understand the real world conditions on this rooftop. The photograph on the left was taken from a drone, which was roughly 7 feet above the ridgeline. And it's basically looking at the southwest view. This is the primary view into the gap, into the area of the gap. This orientation shows mature vegetation extending directly into the antenna path. This is a real-world obstruction that predictive modeling does not always fully reflect, and it will materially affect reliable signal performance. To the right, second photograph, also taken from a drone 7 feet above the ridgeline, is the northwest direction. And this shows basically an unobstructed view projecting over open water, promoting extended propagation rather than the localized coverage required for residential service. So in practical engineering terms, there's no viable transmission direction from this rooftop capable of reliably remediating the identified deficiency. So based upon the field conditions, the network geometry, and established deployment principles, the engineering record does not support the Golden Bough rooftop as a technically viable alternative. With no technically viable alternative demonstrated capable of achieving the service objective, the proposed facility represents the technically appropriate solution supported by the engineering record. I'll remain here available for questions, but for now, I'm going to turn the presentation over to David Bukowski.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is David Witkowski. I'm the CEO of Oku Solutions. We serve a number of clients, one of which is Joint Venture Silicon Valley, a nonprofit based out of San Jose. And through Joint Venture Silicon Valley in 2021, I conducted a study on the effects of small cells on property valuations. This is a property valuation in general from wireless communications facility is a rather contentious topic. There are studies that claim to find disamenities. There are also studies that claim to find no effect or to find positive amenity. To my knowledge, we are the only small cell study that has been done to date. Next slide, please. In the realtor community, in the course of doing this study, we found that there's an often cited 20% reduction in property valuation, which primarily comes down from Sandy Bond's work in Christchurch, New Zealand, which was published in 2005 in the Appraisal Journal. Next slide, please. I'm trying to go fast. Other work that claimed to find disamenity includes Afuso, Filipova, Halebeck, and there are some articles that are on the National Association of Realtors website, which also claim. Interestingly, there are also articles on the National Association of Realtors website, which claim that better coverage actually improves property value. So again, we're back to this question of whether or not this is, I'm sorry. Next slide, please. So I authored this study in conjunction with Dr. Ralph McLaughlin, who has a PhD in real estate economics. We used a data set that included all small cell transactions that were done between 2010 and 2020, and all real estate transactions, 11.6 million of them during that same period. We used a hedonic analysis or a spatial difference in differences method. The data was handed off to Dr. McLaughlin. He had no contact with the carriers that provided the data, aside from me getting him to sign an NDA about the use of the data. Next slide, please. Our studies, again, were small cell focused, and I think that that's notable because many of the studies that claim to find disamenity are based upon macros. And so you can imagine that there would be a big difference between a small cell, which is near a home, and a 80-foot, 120-foot steel lattice or monopole tower. And that would certainly have an effect. It's not just the proximity to the wireless communications facility, it's the design of the wireless communications facility. In my experience in looking at this data and doing this study, I believe that it has more to do with the question of proximity to the larger towers, but that does not translate into the small cell world. We actually found some communities in which there was a significant amenity from coverage. And we can understand why that might be the case. Younger people who are now millennials and Gen Z are now the primary financial power in our society are buying homes. They are a very connected generation. They want to be connected when they are in their homes. Ergo, better connectivity leads to an amenity in property valuation. Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Pete Chubin, Sequoia Deployment Services. There were some questions regarding the PG&E compliance that we discussed at the prior meeting and have continued to come up. This is the northwest elevation that's in the plans. PG&E does pole positions relative to positions on a clock. So 6 o'clock, the bottom of the clock is the street side. This view looks directly at the pole at 7:30. This doesn't look across the street. This doesn't look down the street. This looks diagonally across the street at the pole. So right at the side of the cabinet. The elevation is used to measure heights on the pole, and that's what this does. It marks the heights that are given to us by PG&E of where the attachments would be and set the height of the pole. PG&E approved this drawing. They issued their construction sketch, which is in the record. They issued the contract, which is in the record, which references the design documents. And they used this to apply for their permit to replace the pole. This is the drawing that exists for that. This has the attachment heights approved by PG&E. They are PG&E Green Book and GO 95 compliant. There were some comments regarding the attachments. Well, they could lower the attachment heights. That would cause a mismatch of the cables. We discussed that. Other infractions that would block the traffic going into the driveways. This diagram on the right shows the sections of the pole where the equipment is and shows compliance. You have to look at both items, the elevations and the sections of the pole, to see GO 95 compliance, and the drawings have that, and they were approved by PG&E. On February 4th, PG&E, the job owner, who's the overall project manager for a project for them, at PG&E Arborist and city staff met at the site, and we discussed what PG&E's scope would be. Their replacement scope, how they do that. They confirmed that the pole replacement would work and have minimal impact to the health of the tree. That was a conversation between PG&E and city staff, which also verified the items that I mentioned on the previous slide. With regard to the golden bough, it is constructible, but it does not work technically. That's important to note. We did not just say, well, it doesn't work, we're not gonna look at it. We went out, met with the golden bough, looked at their property, got into the attic, looked how we would structurally attach, where we could place antennas, where we could put equipment, found that we could make all of that work, but it does not work because of the blockage from the trees and the heights. The drone flight was flown at this west corner of the building, directly over the back gable there, and that is for the antenna height. Since then, the golden bow's come back to us with, hey, can you move it over here? Can we do some other things? And that would exacerbate the issues by moving it farther behind the trees. We would need additional height, not just 10 feet allowed above the roof, but by moving it all the way to the north end of the building, we'd be looking at 18 feet of additional height above the roof to get to the antenna position. And then it still does not work from a technical standpoint. So even if we could get a permit for design, it does not work from that technical standpoint. It's not a viable site. With that, I'll hand it back to Paul Albritton.
You'll be glad to know we're ahead of schedule. So I just have 2 slides. My first slide up on facts. We've had now, I think, 3 analyses of this gap. In 2019, Verizon engineers and CTC confirmed the gap. And then once again, in 2025, Verizon engineers, we hired PureCon, a third-party engineer out of New Jersey, and then CTC has reviewed the data. And there's a gap that Verizon Wireless has been trying to fill. It's not a simple coverage gap. FCC has said that small cell gaps are not coverage gaps. They're capacity gaps, they're signal quality gaps, they're SINAR gaps, all these things that were explained in the report that create the situation where we do not have adequate service. So it's a fact that we have a gap. It's been confirmed several times by multiple engineers. The second issue is that our site, as a small cell, complies with your code. We worked really hard to get our site to comply with your code, with the 2 exceptions, which your staff and the special counsel and the initial staff report said were justified and that the site complied with the code. We're now facing this issue as, should we accept the golden bough as an alternative? And we've already heard that technically it does not work because of trees and blockage and so forth. And Pete has told you, yes, it can be constructed. But there's some legal issues on my next slide that I think you need to know about. First is that the federal courts have said that a local jurisdiction can't dictate the technology that a wireless company uses to provide service. In the Clarkstown case, they had a code that required small cells, kind of funny because it's the flip of what we're trying to do here. And the court said that it's not, that the local jurisdiction can't dictate how a wireless company to provide service. That's in the purview of the FCC, and that is sort of what is happening here. Staff made the appropriate argument that under the California Public Utility Code, Section 7901, telephone corporations have the right to put telephone equipment on telephone poles, subject to certain aesthetic requirements. But even under the most recent T-Mobile versus San Francisco case, the California Supreme Court confirms that telephone corporations have the right to put telephone equipment on telephone poles and can't be completely blocked from doing so, which has been the case for the last 7 or 8 years here in Carmel, where we've been unable to put anything into the right-of-way. The third issue is least intrusive means. Now, you've got a very good description of significant gap and least intrusive means, and materially inhibit. Now, materially inhibit standard was adopted by the FCC and confirmed by the Ninth Circuit in the Portland case. Least intrusive means, with respect to small cells, is that you can't unreasonably delay or create unreasonable cost for us to densify our network, add a new service like 5G, what we're doing here, or improve an existing service. So yes, we can talk about significant gap and least intrusive means, but with a small cell here, we're talking about, are you materially inhibiting our ability to put this facility up with a small cell? And by causing us to go and build a macro tower or macro facility with additional radios, specialized equipment, rents, negotiating leases, and many other things, we believe you clearly are unreasonably delaying, or would be if the site was denied, delaying and adding to the cost of our ability to fulfill our obligation to provide service, and would be materially inhibiting. And the very last point, I bet you're glad to hear that, last point, is that the staff suggests that Verizon has not provided enough supporting evidence to show that the Golden Bough would not work. And the court cases actually go the other way. The Anacortes case, T-Mobile versus Anacortes, it's up to if we provide a facial case that our site complies, and the city is proposing an alternative, it's up to the city to show that that's viable and technically feasible. And we don't think the city has shown that the Golden Bough is viable or technically feasible. It's been a really long road, and I'm going to finish 2 minutes early. We really do appreciate the time and effort that you've put in to this review, but we also really believe that this small antenna on top of an existing telephone pole is the least intrusive means of filling the remainder of our gap. We've compromised, we've moved sites out of town, we've combined a site, all in settlement discussions with the city over several years to try and come to this final conclusion, and we encourage you to look at it that way. I have some answers about your question about the 1 mile, the 1 square mile, and why do we need so many facilities, but I'll give you the benefit of asking me that question again so that we can finish on time. And we're here, we've got Rich Conroy, he was an engineer, experienced engineer in New Jersey. You have your own engineer he's a PE, Mr. Affleback, he's a well-known engineer. We've got Mr. Witowski to talk to you about property values, and Pete and myself to answer any questions, and I truly appreciate the 20 minutes and your patience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicants before we move to the public?
I have some questions.
You have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, so we had a discussion about small cells versus macro cells when we approved the wireless ordinance. That was back in August 2023. And back then, I think I made the point that Carmel is so small and compact that the problems with wireless communication can be resolved by putting macro cells at the edges of town, right? So I understand, isn't it true that Verizon's plan A was to build a macro cell down on the water treatment plant? And what you're presenting today is actually your plan B with the small cells?
I think, do you want to take that for a second? Okay.
Commissioner, we discussed that at the last hearing, and yes, there was a plan to build at the water treatment plant. That was a different coverage area. We had that in our slide deck, and that's in the reports as well, that shows that the water treatment plant with a 75-foot tower, I'm doing this part from memory, 75 feet tall, 67-foot rad center, would not cover the objective area. It would cover Carmel Point. It would cover down at that end of Carmel Valley where the river comes out, but it would not cover this objective, and the maps presented at that time demonstrated that. The records that we have show that that was a solution for that area, and Carmel was still looking at a small cell solution. When that site finally died after we could not obtain the lease, it had to do also with the state parks needing to grant access through parkland, and then the county wanting the site to be removed if the trees got cut down. There was years of work at that time before it was deemed completely not viable. The small cells for Carmel already existed in plan, so they were both needed.
I'll say really quickly, we don't want to take too long. Rich Conway is on the line. They modeled again that location with a 75-foot tower and confirmed it would not provide coverage, but
You proposed a 90-foot tower for that project, if I remember correctly.
90, you say? Mm-hmm. We looked back at the records, and it was 75 with a 67-foot rad center. And we did look back at the past application
So
information.
what gap would exist with that solution, with the Plan A?
Pardon me? What?
What is the gap from Plan A?
So let me tell a quick story. I've been doing this for too many years. I started with cell companies in 1984. We originally thought we would cover the whole Bay Area with 28 towers. And that's because each tower can only cover so many phone calls at one time. And at that time, we thought there'd be 2% market penetration on cell phones. And that obviously hasn't happened. The miracle of cellular is that you had mobile phones in the 70s, but we had one antenna on Sutro Tower, and it would cover about 80 phone calls, 80 phones, and that we had to be really rich to have one. By dividing it up into different cells, we add the number of calls. Each time we add another cell, we increase the capacity of the network so that you can have more and more and more calls. And the way you do that, Sutro Tower is turned down, Mount Tamalpais is turned down, Mount Diablo is turned down. All of the high sites have been turned off, and we have little smaller cells that can take in the capacity, the volume, the trillions of gigabytes that are being used by people with these networks. So with big high sites, you have a limited capacity. And that's why you ended up having a smaller cell which can provide more capacity. You also create interference, and the principal gap that we have right now is signal to noise. It's a call quality problem. I made a mistake last week. I said that the Los Lobos Ridge site had been turned off. That's not true. It is still running, but the signal is so weak that it's competing. It's 3 miles away, and it's competing with the site up at Founders, which is 2.7 miles away. And the two signals are too weak to provide a consistent call. So it's called a signal to noise problem and a call quality problem. So we stick a small cell in the middle of that, and it creates a dominant signal that allows the phones to connect to that dominant signal.
I understand the benefits of a small cell, but there are also disadvantages that you don't talk about. The first disadvantage is it's powered by PG&E, by the pole. So if PG&E has an outage, small cell has an outage. If you use a macro cell, let's say on the power plant, or on the water treatment plant, you can put backup power because it's a one big antenna. You can have a generator. It serves multiple service providers, so you can survive a power outage. The small cells will not survive power outage.
We actually do have battery backup on small cells, but not this one. That's right. And that's because
There's no space.
Pardon me?
There's no space for batteries.
It can be done. When I was in Palo Alto, the ARB, the Architectural Review Board, didn't like the look of the battery backup, so they took it off. When I got up to the city council, the city council in Palo Alto said, we want the battery backup. And so they put battery backup boxes back onto the poles. So I understand, and I think the robust nature of the Verizon network is well known by public safety and elsewhere. And we would like to have battery backup, but we found that in communities, it is not popular to have the battery backup on the pole.
Commissioner, while Paul was speaking, we brought up the map that from the previous exhibit that showed the wastewater facility coverage and that it doesn't serve. And to shorten the conversation, what the record shows is the facility at the wastewater treatment plant is not a viable option. We could not lease it. We could not get agreeable conditions of approval for that location. It would not have longevity.
Wait.
So
is this the same solution that we have now in Pebble Beach, macro cell? Because the macro cell in Pebble Beach can reach to us 2.7 miles. This one, you're kind of implying that it doesn't go over the mile.
We could have the consultant who produced this map answer that question. Rich could answer that question specifically, but the entire discussion is hypothetical because the site is not available to us. It was tried for several years before it was deemed not viable, we cannot get.
I understand, but this is a decision we
It's
make
also,
for.
it's also terrain. The Founder's Grove is propagating straight over water, part of it. Water actually enhances the signal. So there are a number of reasons why a site will propagate further and further distance and less distance. In addition to how it's configured.
Sorry to interrupt you. You have direct line of sight to.
So Rich,
Carmel Point.
are you online? Can you answer that question? Why Pebble Beach can reach at 2.7 miles, but the sanitary
Yes.
district?
Yes.
Still on?
You're talking about the Founders Building sector that's covering out here 2.7 miles away. That is a bad thing. That is not something that's desired. That is something that is undesired, and there's no way to remove that because it's a pure line of sight carrying over water.
Yeah,
Even with
Rich, apologies to cut you off. How does that compare to the sanitary district site in terms of serving that distance?
It's not, the sanitary site, it has terrain. It has terrain obstructions. It has other obstructions in its way. The terrain increases relative to that site as opposed to it dropping off and then looking back up a hill. So it has different terrain features from the sanitation facility and as the wastewater facility. And as we demonstrated in our last report, supplement 2, it does not provide coverage into this gap area, the specific gap area that's subject of this application. It's not even available, obviously, from a leasing perspective, but even if it was, it would be serving the southern area, not the core area of this gap.
I understand your questions, and I think, one of the principal problems is where we would put these macro towers that you're talking about because of they're disfavored by the communities. But again, Verizon engineers are extremely well skilled. They're big teams. They work on what is the best way to provide service to a particular topography based on demand and demand changes, but based on the phones and the receptibility of the phones and everything else. And they come up with these network designs. And that's why the federal law really is that local jurisdictions don't get to dictate how we provide service. It's something that the wireless companies
we're very
in
concerned.
conjunction with the FCC.
Yeah, we're very concerned that you are not the only service provider, right? So tomorrow, T-Mobile will come in, Sprint will come in, and they will ask about their own small cells. And we end up with this multiple small cells in the city. If you put one tower on the water treatment plant, you can have 10 antennas on it, right? You can have Sprint, you can have Verizon, you can have, and we as a planning commission, we're trying to figure out what's good for the city, for the entire South Carmel, for all service provider. We're not, I think we're not defining the problem correctly. The problem that was brought to us is, do we put a small cell from one service provider, Verizon, on one particular pole in one particular area? That's not the problem. The problem is, how do we improve communications in south of Carmel for all service providers without impacting the village character? That's the problem we need to solve.
I hear you, I hear you, and I don't, if your solution were true, that we could have these macros that would be co-located by all the other carriers, I think they would already exist. In other words, the other carriers would have done that. Verizon would have done that, but it isn't that simple. In terms of further applications by other small cell company or other companies to put in small cells, they could have done that. You haven't had any applications since your ordinance was passed. It's a very, very difficult ordinance. Our consultants to prepare just the drive tests that have to be in 3 decibel increments based on each individual frequency, based on our demonstrated threshold with the link budget, is very difficult, and the entire application process is very difficult, which is probably why you haven't seen many applications. And I don't think you're going to rubber stamp the next company that comes along either. You're going to put them through the gauntlet just like you're putting us through the gauntlet. And I would expect that they will be shy to do so, and if they do, maybe they'll negotiate with you the way we did, so that instead of 5 small cells in Carmel, we only have one pole, which is the one central part of the town we can't reach from the outside without creating interference with our entire network.
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt here because
Thank you.
we're getting really far afield. And I want to make the point that we're only considering the Verizon application tonight. I understand Commissioner Karapoff's concern, larger problem, but that's really not what we're talking about tonight. And I think it's very important that we stay focused on this particular application and not get too far afield. It's a very complicated issue. There's a lot of things we have to consider, and we don't need to make it any more complicated than it already is. Okay, thank you for your presentation. I will give you opportunity at the end of this, the other discussion, to answer any relevant questions that come up. So at this time, I'd like to invite the public up and make their statements.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair LePage and Planning Commissioners. I'm Christy Hollenbeck. I asked that our attorney from New York, Andrew Campanelli, speak first again due to time difference in New York. Mr. Campanelli is an expert in federal telecom law with 30 years experience and will be followed by our second attorney, R.L. Strauss from Berkeley, who specializes in California telecom law and will present via Zoom tonight. We have many supporters, but to save time, because the subject is complex, most prefer that our attorneys speak at length and allow time for questions and rebuttals to Verizon's statements. Can I ask the audience to please raise your hand if you support protecting our neighborhoods from cell tower proliferation and preserving the aesthetics and charm of Carmel-by-the-Sea? Thank you. Thank you all so much. Okay, thank you. I think we've lost some because it was quite a long presentation by Verizon. This Verizon application serves as the first test of our wireless ordinance. It's essential to establish clear boundaries for telecom companies. Having called Carmel home for nearly 17 years and exploring many parts of the world, I can genuinely say that Carmel is truly one of the most beautiful places. It's a special place we all share responsibility to protect and cherish for the future. Verizon's proposal to place a large, intrusive structure in front of a small historic home is highly disrespectful, and it's unacceptable for our neighborhood. Many residents have testified that they are satisfied with the current phone service. We are not requesting upgrades for streaming services. Our wireless ordinance was carefully crafted to protect aesthetics and property values. Nobody wants a tall pole with a 6-foot box and a meter facing into their window, just a few feet from their home. Common sense tells us that this would decrease home values and irreparably harm our neighborhood's charm. Top real estate agents on the Monterey Peninsula, Tim Allen and Shelley Lynch, have written letters stating that homes would be less valuable if a large eyesore is allowed on our street. Unfortunately, our staff overlooked this important impact of their report. Verizon has not demonstrated a significant gap or proven that placing a large, unsightly structure in the R1 least preferred zone is the only solution. It certainly is not the least intrusive site. Our ordinance established tiers, obviously a stealth site on a commercial building. Rooftop is more aesthetically pleasing than an industrial equipment outside of someone's home. As planners, your responsibility is to enforce our wireless ordinance and to set clear boundaries. You have a lot of power to make factual determinations. You get to decide what is acceptable and what is not, according to our code. Federal judges are unlikely to overturn discretionary decisions made by planning boards. We must accept some risk in order to protect what we cherish. Carmel's beauty and character are worth defending. Please safeguard Carmel-by-the-Sea's aesthetics and prevent neighborhood proliferation. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you. Okay, is Mr. Campanelli going to speak now? Yes. Okay, Mr. Campanelli, go ahead.
Yes. Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good. I don't know why my camera's not working, but I'm here. So good evening. Thank you. I wanted to address the board's position and the board's responsibilities under the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. This board is the finder of fact. The applicant doesn't come in and get to say, we have a gap in service and the golden bough can't work. Those are factual determinations that you get to make. And when you make those determinations, you're allowed to use common sense, and of greater import, you're allowed to use your own eyes. When I first saw this application, and I knew the golden bough was a few blocks away, I tried to figure out how the applicant was going to try to claim that it had to go where they want to put it, and it can't go 2 blocks away, because somehow that can't work, 2 blocks away. And so I looked at the first PeerCon report, the one they submitted on October 14, 2025. Now, just so the record is perfectly clear, as the finder of fact, you have the power to consider what weight to give any evidence that's been submitted to you, and to assess the credibility of the people or experts giving you the evidence. So I tried to figure out how they're going to try to reverse engineer a claim that the Golden Bough wouldn't work despite the fact that it's 2 blocks away. And so, sure enough, PeerCon submits a report to you that says that if they go to Golden Bough, it'll give them 6 to 11% less coverage. And I'm like, I can't wait to see how they're going to claim that's true. And so what the first PeerCon report said that they'll get 6 to 11% less coverage, assuming that the tower is installed at a height of 20 feet. Once again, that would be nonsensical since the height of the roof itself is 24 feet. And if you put a 4-foot antenna on top, you're already at 28 feet. On top of that, they said, assuming you use a low-profile canister clover type antenna. Now, I don't know of a single instance anywhere in the United States where Verizon would come in and put a clover canister antenna on a building the size of the Golden Bough, with a roof the size of the Golden Bough. Now, in October, they said that's why it can't go there. And so we addressed the fact that that's absurd. Those statements they're making in the report may be factually true, but they're absurd. Nobody will install an antenna at 20 feet when the roof itself is 24 feet, and nobody's going to install a canister clover type antenna on the Golden Bough. So now they come up with a new excuse. The new excuse is trees. There are trees blocking the way. I looked very carefully at the Golden Bough roof. It's massive. In fact, I couldn't count them all. I think there's 100 solar panels on that roof. And if you look at that roof from Google Earth, it's massive. And there are huge areas where a wireless facility can be installed, which is not blocked by trees or foliage at all. Even if there's a tree somewhere that would block a sliver of portion from the transmitter, that is not going to block service of such significant magnitude that a denial of the application because they could put it on the Golden Bough would, and here's the test, materially inhibit Verizon from competing in a fair and balanced regulatory environment under the totality of the circumstances. Federal law does not require you to allow them to get seamless, perfect coverage at all. So if there's a tiny sliver that may be blocked by a tree somewhere, that does not mean that the Golden Bough cannot be used. I told you early on, it is clearly a superior alternative location, which could involve a complete stealth facility. The size of that building and that shape of the building would be perfect for an installation like a cupola, where they install a cupola just like you'd put on somebody else's house, only it's constructed of RF translucent materials. The antennas would be completely concealed, nobody could see them, and they're beautiful. And they've installed them on municipal buildings and libraries and places like that. Or you could use a clock tower, or churches, they use steeples, but the Golden Bough would have no adverse aesthetic impact whatsoever. And I ask you to look at the roof of the Golden Bough, go on Google Earth, and assess for yourself the credibility of the claim by their expert that trees are going to somehow block the signal. You are allowed to use common sense, and you're allowed to use your own eyes to determine if that is a plausible argument. This new claim, which didn't exist in this past October, but it exists now because we shot down the last excuses they came up with. I heard the attorney say, if you deny this, you are going to be materially inhibiting our ability to put this tower up. That is not the standard. The standard is, will a denial of this application, citing the fact as a potential alternative, less intrusive location, would materially inhibit Verizon from competing in a fair and balanced regulatory environment under the totality of the circumstances, and if the evidence before you shows that is not the case, the Golden Bough is clearly a suitable alternative. And when they talk about in-building coverage, there's no evidence of in-building coverage. If they really claim there's a problem in in-building coverage, all they have to do is walk in the building anywhere and test it. You haven't seen any of that. As far as the other consultant that you chose, one of your board members asked the right question. Did you do any testing yourself? No. Your consultant took whatever data was submitted by the applicant as if it's gospel and says, okay, yeah, this looks right. They didn't collect any data of their own or check the veracity of the applicant's data. They didn't suggest to you, hey, City of Carmel, let's do our own test because maybe their data is not credible. What I can say is this. You have the power to deny this application because there's a suitable, less intrusive alternative location. And as long as that exists, that's the only test you need to pass. The only other things you need to do is make a decision before the expiration of the shot clock. You must make your factual determinations on the record and issue a separate written decision. So if they choose to try to challenge you, any judge that might review this will understand clearly why you made the decision you did. And here there's only one decision. It's fairly clear that granting this application would be inconsistent with your code. It's your code that provides the basis for denying the application, not the TCA. However, the TCA does have the material inhibition standard, and that's the standard in the Ninth Circuit. So thank you for the time, and I think I know what the appropriate decision should be in this case. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Campanelli. Okay, is it Strau? Is he going to speak to us now?
Hi, good evening. Am I coming in clear?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. I'm glad to be speaking with you again. I provided letters on January 21st and January 30th, and also a design violation diagram on February 4th. And a letter earlier today in response to a staff report, along with a Word document listing bases to deny the application. Rob Beagle, a wireless expert, also provided a review of the PureCon and CTC reports. I'm going to start with focusing on some issues on the staff report and then move on to what Verizon is discussing in the presentation today. Contrary to the staff report, a reasonable person would obviously recognize that this wireless facility is what it is. It is a prototypical wireless facility. It's frankly ridiculous to call it stealth, merely because the radios are inside a 6-foot round box, which will have a green and white Verizon wireless facility sign on it. That is what a small cell looks like today. And in fact, it's quite a large small cell. As was discussed in the staff presentation, once you include those gaps between that box and the pole, which under the code, or more accurately under the design guidelines, are required to be filled in, it exceeds the maximum volume that the city has allowed. Because it is not stealth, it will be subject and be allowed to be expanded and increased. This permit that you're considering tonight, under state law, will typically have to be 10 years. That is 10 years of time of technological development, residential change, preferences and needs for data and telecommunication services. And during those 10 years, it is not speculative that that facility will be modified, particularly given the difficulties that applicants have in obtaining approval, and correctly so, for new facilities elsewhere in the city. It is plain that under GO 95 and PG&E rules, applicants, Verizon or other carriers, can modify that equipment. They can take down that cabinet and put it on the ground under the FCC regulations. They put it on the ground instead. They can put a side-mounted antenna there. They can replace a top-mounted antenna with many panels. And those changes would not be subject to any design review. They'd not be subject to any discretionary review. And they're not limited by the zoning height or the volume caps that the city's code and design guidelines have presently established for new facilities. It is a job of the Commission to consider, and some might say speculate, about those things that they are now enabling to occur through their approval today. It is part of the same project within the terms of CEQA, and it is part of their obligation, your obligation, to ensure that the general plan consistency is maintained throughout the duration of the permit.
Mr. Strau, can I just ask you how much time you think you're going to need? I want to make sure I give you enough time.
Yes.
Is 5 minutes enough time for you to make your presentation?
Sure, and I hopefully can ask any questions you have afterwards.
Yeah, questions, we don't count
do it.
questions. Okay, thank you, proceed, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This clearly is not a stealth site, and that itself imposes tremendous risks that are not faced by other permits. And that itself also severely impacts the property value of adjacent homeowners. And any analysis that was done, or any general studies that may have done, as one that Mr. Wachowski mentioned, they have no applicability to a situation like this, where someone directly adjacent can look at the site, in fact are required under the disclosure standards of the CAR forms and others, to identify that site when they seek to sell their home. That will obviously have a detrimental impact, and will also have an impact on the historic property next door. Staff cannot validly conclude that it will not impair the historic elements of that property, which include the setback from the street, the scale relative to the street, the visibility of design elements, without any analysis of the potential build-out of this facility. Basically, what staff are asserting is that any change, any potential change, will not impact the historical aspect of that property. And that simply is untenable. Under federal law, that also triggers the applicant to seek NEPA review and an EA, which it simply has not done. And your code requires that the applicant demonstrate that it completed all required federal environmental review prior to obtaining permits, not afterwards. That is a requirement in the checklist as well. Turning now to the issue that's been discussed primarily so far about the feasibility of the Golden Bough site. The main question that needs to be asked, that hasn't been asked, is why is it that all the maps and data has been presented to the city for all the surrounding sites, for the built sites and for the unbuilt sites that Verizon operates, have the exact same parameters for all the configurations. So that's to say the azimuth, the tilt, the height, power configurations, the beam widths, those are maintained the same for the Golden Bough as for the proposed location. And what essentially is happening is Verizon is creating a Carmelo Street-shaped gap based on the design of their network, and they're saying nothing else but a Carmelo Street site will fit in that gap. And then they didn't even bother to model what was obvious to anyone who reviewed it, including our experts, immediately, that the Golden Bough parameters would not work. And when they finally did model those parameters, their models demonstrated that it could work. And in the two continuances since the January 21st meeting, there's been no discussion until 2 days ago, or 3 days ago perhaps, about the tree problem. This is a site that the City Council, and I believe the Planning Commission also denied in late 2021, specifically because of the potential for the Golden Bough. It is ridiculous, and it is also incredibly unfair for the applicant to show up today and claim that there's something new called trees that make it infeasible. And the Commission should not take at face value these assertions that are not backed up by any data, and also are inconsistent with the photos that Mr. Beagle presented in his report that you have in front of you that show multiple clear sight lines from many points along the edge of the rooftop. I'd be happy to answer any questions. There are several other issues I've identified in my letters, but I leave it to the Commission to ask the questions it believes are relevant, and we do request that you ask APPLICANT to confirm, in fact, that the parameters that they have used for all their surrounding sites and network are the same for all different modeling of the Golden Bough and the proposed site, since that is what their records show. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Strauss? None. All right, thank you, Mr. Strauss. Okay, I'm going to invite any other members of the public come up to this time. You have 3 minutes to make your comments.
I just want to thank the small group of residents who have spearheaded the ordinance, the wireless ordinance. I don't know how many people in Carmel actually know that several years ago, a group of dedicated residents spent many, many hours and a lot of money to write a wireless ordinance that would protect our city. We're very lucky to have them. They've stepped up again, and I just want them to know that I really appreciate all their efforts.
Thank you. The next speaker, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. I urge you to deny the proposal due to the incompatibility with our residential character and negative impacts. The foundation of our general plan prioritizes natural and aesthetic resources, historic heritage, views, health, safety, welfare, and residential character. Carmel-by-the-Sea is primarily residential, with its character subordinate to commercial interests, as the plaque says behind you. Our Planning Commission, City Council, and Coastal Commission certified a strong, legally compliant wireless ordinance that supports those values. The staff report recommends denial. Our Planning Commission is the authority on enforcing our codes. It is an unreasonable special exception request with unproven necessity. The claims of gap in phone service and drop calls at the site are not significant. The claims of gap not proven as significantly different from other locations. The applicant reports full coverage to the FCC and must provide accurate information. Most compatible locations exist, even if a significant gap were present or proven. The design violations are unreasonable and do not necessitate a special exception. It exceeds the cubic feet and height limits, violating zoning codes. It violates stealth requirements. It's located in front of a historic resource, violating window setbacks and creating unreasonable impacts. Negatively affects public and private views, undermining neighborhood enjoyment. Documented negative impacts are supported by letters and photos as evidence. Our attorney just said that they can change the location of the equipment and become more obtrusive without review. The approval of this tower would make this location a base station for additional after-the-fact equipment. A 20-foot taller structure, multiple antennas, more pole attachments, and up to 8 ground cabinets, cluttering public spaces. Approval would lead to infrastructure proliferation in the residential zones by multiple carriers. Please note the trench design violates public rights-of-way safety codes and should not be given special exception. The design violates our public rights-of-way safety codes. It risks to the environment, people, and property due to trenching through the oak tree's roots. No study on the trench impact on the tree roots, risking limb breakage hazards, soil and drainage instability, affecting both the tree and the facility zone of people and property, creating injury risks. The height of the cabinet also impacts access to fire trucks in the public rights-of-way. Verizon has at least 5 alternative solutions they did not disprove. Co-location opportunities are preferred over new facilities. No evidence submitted against the feasibility of the Sunset Towers or Dowd Arcade as alternatives, co-location alternatives. The city approved Node 2 at Sunset and Node 5 in South Carmel, which were not proven as technically infeasible. They must show no Tier 3 locations are feasible. Verizon provided no analysis. In fact, our application says if you apply in a Tier 1 or Tier 2 zone, tell us that a Tier 3 zone is not feasible. There was no data provided, not even an analysis. They did not analyze nearby 2-tier locations, like the Wayfair Church, which was looked at for La Playa's proposal. They did not say that was infeasible. The La Playa location was denied, with the Golden Bough as a more superior alternative feasible, technically feasible and available site. And our staff has confirmed with CTC that this still remains a technically feasible and available site as superior. I'm looking at the Pebble Beach cell tower, 2.7 miles away, going through trees and terrain and water. So can the Golden Bough, which is 1,000 feet, a couple blocks away from the location they're proposing. In conclusion, the applicant's claims of effective prohibition of service are unproven, necessity is unsubstantiated, and more compatible alternatives exist. Consistency in applying city codes is vital for community integrity and public trust. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to refer to you as commissioners, not as you guys. Okay.
Thank you.
The key here is the precedent. It's not just about this pole, although we found out surprisingly that this pole itself can be altered, modified, expanded, changed, etc. It's about all the other poles in the city. It's about all the other cell phone companies and all the poles. And it might be a lot more than that. What about future technologies in the next 5 or 10 years by not just the cell phone companies, but someone else that might want to use the telephone poles? And further, what if we ever decide we want to go underground with our electrical wires? The telephone poles will stay there if the cell phone companies are on the telephone pole already. So the precedent to me is just the critical thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Commissioners, I apologize. I kind of want to reiterate the fact that it seems that the general, what they're telling us, it continues to change over time, specifically with the trees in the Golden Bough. It was a viable alternative in the past, and now all of a sudden trees are the problem. And the pictures I'm seeing on when they're put up there, they had a picture zoomed in on that tree trying to make it look like it was completely blocking everything. We've shown the pictures of the trees. They are thin trees. There's got to be ways of getting through there. There's options of trimming trees. The fact that they say they put this beam that's going out to the ocean like there's no other trees in the way of this facility, there are trees absolutely everywhere in our city. And I walk that street every day, and there's 70-foot pine trees, 80-foot cypress. There's trees everywhere. So it's impossible for me to believe that one tree is going to prevent that tower on Golden Bough from being efficient. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Joe DiNucci, resident. I want to speak to Verizon as well as to the commission. We all need cell service. It's 2026. We all use it. We all need it. We're all grateful for this amazing, almost miraculous technology. There is a gap. Some of the neighbors that we have are impacted. I talked to some of them this morning. This is not a non-problem. But an oversized pole in front of a historic home is not okay with us. No one who owns such a house would ever be okay with such a thing, would ever tolerate that. We need some practical accommodations from Verizon. We are your customers. Don't snow us or threaten us. Work with us to solve this problem.
Next speaker, please.
The perils of sitting in the back of the room. You all know me, you've been in my home. I'll try very hard not to repeat anything that's already been said. What strikes me is that we have a process, and so I'd like my comments, which are general comments, to be in the record. We have on the one hand about $1 million worth of payroll over here of a company hired by Verizon to get this permit done. Over here we have a lot of citizenry who've spent time, and I'm one of 3 people who financed the opposition, if you will. And it strikes me that the process by which Verizon submits, or the applicant submits, a bunch of studies, and then the planning department responds to those studies, and the citizenry has to hire their own representatives instead of the city just simply doing their own independent work is something to consider. The other comment, and I'm done, is that since I spoke the first time, we found out that we have to replace our roof. And we've come into contact with the requirements of the city and the planning department about roofs. They're quite limited. There are comments about color and materials and so forth, and it's pretty narrow. But that demonstrates that the planning department cares very much about the appearances of this city and maintaining the long history of its attraction. So I don't see why the appearance of this equipment is not also subject to the same kind of scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you. And I first want to thank you for all your time you spent. I know you have multiple jobs too, and doing this is just an added layer onto that complexity. So thank you very much for your time. I think we're at a disconnect. We're going down two tracks. We have one track where the majority of our citizens, most of these people behind me, want to keep the charm, the special charm, the uniqueness of Carmel that we've seen throughout the years that we're so proud of. On the other side is a planning staff that their vision doesn't align with what we feel the city's aligns with. We feel like we're defending against Verizon, but we're also defending against our city staff and also the lawyers in trying to get this application. We're opposed at almost every obstacle. We should all be on the same team for this. This is the wireless ordinance. We spent a year trying to craft this document. In it are phrases like least compatible. You know, I look at that word, what does that mean? And I go, well, take the opposite, compatible. If it was compatible, we could put it somewhere, right? We could put it here, it'd be compatible. But it's least compatible, it doesn't belong there. And that's what we said in the document. Then we add another layer on top of that where we said least compatible, or least, we say it's highly incompatible. So least compatible, highly incompatible, same thing, but you had put that adverb on there, highly incompatible. It just adds another layer on top of that. So here's where this project lies: least compatible tier, highly incompatible zone on a historic property. I think you ticked almost every box to make this one of the worst locations to put this project. Finally, let's see, I would like to. The project provides adverse visual impacts. It's definitely not stealth. Just because you paint it brown doesn't make it stealth. It violates the design guidelines. It's 10 feet, 11 inches high. The maximum was 10 feet. It's over 17 cubic feet. It violates the ordinance tier system. It violates the ordinance tree protection clause. It's a much bigger pole, bigger excavation, more problem to the roots possibly. CEQA and NEPA, we talked about that. The regulations were not fully complied with. It does not comply with the PG&E rules. And if you look at this project, you know, this is what they could do. It's called a 6409 attachment. Basically what they can do, they can take down that big thing they had on the side of the pole. They can put up another cell antenna. They can put the cabinets down on the ground. You could put 4 cabinets per change. They can be 3 foot high. So you can have 2 more cabinets when what's labeled up there right now. So you got to think of this project for that 10-year duration of that permit in accordance with the general plan. So this could go out to 10 years. It won't be Verizon, maybe be Sprint or somebody else could place all this equipment out in front of the property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello. I'm Jeannie Ferrara. I'm a real estate agent for Coldwell Banker. I spoke at the last meeting. As a real estate agent, it's my fiduciary duty to protect the people that I represent. The National Association of Realtors found that 79% of 1,000 respondents surveyed said that under no circumstances would they ever purchase or rent a property within a few blocks of a cell tower. Research also showed that property values can decrease up to 20% depending on how close the cell tower is to the property lines. These proposed cell towers threaten the value of our homes and must be kept out of residential neighborhoods permanently. The lowest price home in Carmel is about $2 million. 20% of $2 million is $400,000. How would you feel if your home value went down $400,000? That's the least expensive home in Carmel. 30 countries around the world have opposed installation of 5G cell towers and technology. The US, the UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, India, Australia, New Zealand, and Brazil. I lost my place. They've banned this technology. Large insurance companies have left California because of fire hazards. Our insurance rates have tripled. Monterey, Pacific Grove, Pebble Beach, Carmel Valley, Big Sur, and especially Carmel are in high fire hazard zones. And in 2021, Verizon recalled 2.5 million mobile Wi-Fi hotspots due to fire risk, overheating, fires, and minor burns that were reported, proving that this equipment poses a fire hazard. Fiber optic cable does not pose a fire hazard. Californians have already paid for fiber optic cable to their homes in their phone bills over 20 years, as proven by the lawsuit Irregulators versus FCC, heard in the DC Court of Appeals in January 2020, exposing one of the largest accounting scandals in American history, involving mostly AT&T, Verizon, and CenturyLink. The FCC is a captured agency whose chairman and commissioners are typically former employees and lobbyists of the trillion-dollar telecom industry. This is not about coverage. It's about profit. Please, please do not lower the values of property in Carmel and ruin this beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Planning Commission, for taking all this time. I love this town. I moved here in 1968, and I'm appalled by what's happening with this cell tower thing, or what they want to do here. I think the FCC has not updated its safety standards since 1996. So what kind of cell phones were we using in 1996? Were they 1 gig? Okay, and they were ordered in, I believe, 2021 in a court of appeals in the District of Columbia to show more evidence on the difference between ionizing radiation that heats your tissue and non-ionizing radiation that doesn't heat your tissue but thrashes your DNA. So, the FCC, I agree with the prior speaker, they are a revolving door agency. They have a revolving door with the CEOs of all the big companies. And 5 years later, they have not updated any safety information on the difference between non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation. So I am glad that we're still able, as a community or across the country, across the world, to say, wait a minute. I'm glad about that. And you may have heard, or in my letter to you, that there's a big move for the FCC to get Congress on its side in the House, so they would have total control over where any cell tower is placed across this country. in every state, in every municipality, in every county, in every quaint, beautiful town like Carmel. We wouldn't even be able to oppose it. And that's what the FCC is trying to pull now. So thank you all for listening to all of us who love this community. I know you're here, you must love this community too. And let's not let the corporatocracy take control of our environment and our property values, the aesthetics, and our health and well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, I don't see anybody else getting up here. Do we have any hands up online? No, sir. That's surprising. Okay, we do have a hand up. Just a minute. My screen, I don't see anything.
Carol Hall, if you'd like to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Great. I just want to quickly say I support Tasha Witt and Christy Hollenbeck and the residents of Carmel, the speakers tonight, in keeping Verizon from being approved for this project. And if it goes on the Golden Bough, great, but otherwise, I think that it is unconscionable that we put this utility where they plan on putting it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, anybody else with their hand up online? I can't see it, so you want to go ahead and call them? Or identify their hand?
Michael McWalters.
Michael, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Chair LePage, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Thank you. When this originally came about in 20 or 21, when we were just beginning the writing of our ordinance, Chair LePage, you had an opinion, and it was no cell towers in the R1. And I completely agreed with that. Then we discovered that we couldn't just outright ban it, so we made it least feasible, or least, it was at the bottom of the least category. And that was 4 years ago, and in the objection that the city, in the vote that the city council took to deny the La Playa, Mayor Potter said, I think this is for Pebble Beach, because the data that they were showing didn't show a significant gap in coverage for the La Playa. And now here we are 4 years later, and we're just at a point where it's the same argument, it's the same Verizon. They've got this thing about Carmelo. And in the PeerCon report, their analysis on the Golden Bough begins with the antenna being 20 feet when it can be 34 feet. PeerCon didn't do any adjusting of the sites, of all the Verizon sites, to the network to optimize overall coverage with the Golden Bough alternative. And then PeerCom admitted that the Golden Bough alternative could, if it were tweaked, significantly address a purported coverage gap. Underline the word purported, because in the January 21st meeting, Mr. Speaker, whose home this tower is going to be in front of if it's approved, is a Verizon customer, and he says, I get excellent service, I have no problems. Doug Hollenbeck was walking up from his home on Carmelo, and he was streaming the meeting on his Verizon phone. He said, I have 3 bars and 4 bars. The neighbor next door to Mr. Speaker, Rebecca Lee, said the same thing. I'm a Verizon customer, I have no problems on the phone. I regularly walk Carmelo, morning, noon, and night. I'm generally on the phone with my wife, Jean. I've never had a drop call in 15 years. So there's no significant gap in coverage. And as far as I'm concerned, I heard Mr. Alberton use the word to describe us as being unreasonable. I think he's unreasonable. I think Verizon's unreasonable, because they have these 2 sites called 002 and 005 they made an agreement with City Attorney Pierrick 4 years ago that they would relocate the 4 sites inside Carmel to outside Carmel, and they're just sitting there as undeveloped sites. One engineer, Mr. Shubin, said, well, we have to put fiber optic in, and that's why they're not built. Then Mr. Alberton said, well, we need to configure the apertures with the 001 Carmelo site with the 002 and the 005. That's just a lot of hooey. And as far as I'm concerned, they're the ones that are being unreasonable, not us. And as a previous speaker said, we should all be on the same team. They should be saying, we want to work with you. We love Carmel as much as you do. We want to preserve its character, its tradition. It's the most beautiful meeting of land and sea. And obviously, this should be denied. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, they didn't develop 002 and 005. And the question is why? How come? And I think it's because if they did develop 002 and 005, that coverage gap that they're purporting to have at 4 southeast of 10th, it would go away. So I don't believe anything in this report, and please deny it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, do we have any more hands up?
Can you remind them to just let their hand on the Zoom screen, because some people were like, I was trying to call in.
Okay, I don't. Chris Reimers? There we are. Okay, I see your hand now. Go ahead, Christy. Can you hear me, Christy?
Can you hear me okay?
Now we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Christy Reimers, and I just wanted to say I wholeheartedly agree with what Michael just said and what Carol just said, and the residents, that, gosh, if any of us came to you with a project that looked like this, it would be denied just based on our codes. And I just wholeheartedly support the denial of this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, now I don't see any more hands. Okay, I'm going to allow the applicant to come back up, just to answer questions that came up during the discussion.
I think, first I have to say, I never called anybody here unreasonable. I said that they're asked for materially inhibit, that it causes unreasonable cost and delay, and that's what the definition of materially inhibit is. I think that's the only time I ever used the word unreasonable. I did misspeak last time. I said that 002 and 005 were not on because it was an overall fiber issue, and it turns out that the fiber company, we contacted them, they've been unable to put fiber to those poles because they've been unable to get the encroachment permits, which were heard by the city council here in November 2024, and have not been able to get another hearing and get those encroachment permits to put fiber to sites 002 and 005. Addressing quickly Mr. Campanelli's comments, he said that he's never heard of a clover antenna on top of a building. Well, that's what's on the Sunset Center. It's a quarter-mile away from this site. He challenged the data that was provided, and PureCon provided certificates showing that the probes being used had been verified, and that information was verified by Mr. Afflerbach at CTC. He mentioned that the roof is big. You could put anything anywhere. I doubt he's been on the roof. Couldn't get on the roof. We had drones fly up, around, and over the roof and identify with the landlord where antennas would go. And there is limited space on the roof, and we analyzed it in good faith in trying to determine. The question was, why didn't you go there in 2021 or since 2021 when the city said go to Golden Bough? And the answer is it doesn't work. Our RF engineers tell us it doesn't work, and they don't want to pursue that solution. 6409 says claim that we could modify this telephone pole and put all kinds of things on it. If you look at your code that you guys drafted, Tier 5 is modifications under 6409, and that requires an AUP and a building permit, both appealable to the city council. Any applications to modify that pole have to go through the process, and it's appealable to the city council. So I don't know what you're talking about in terms of being able to just modify the facility. Undergrounding was mentioned. Verizon actually favors undergrounding. If you underground your telephone poles, that happens in many jurisdictions. They usually put up a light pole or something similar like that, where we're able to attach sometimes more streamlined equipment than previously. I mentioned the drone photos. Those are all can be analyzed and reviewed. There is no narrowing or telephoto photos of the trees. We have all the GPS data, all the camera angle data available from our photo sim photographer, who can come and testify as necessary. There was a comment about property values and $2 million homes, $400,000 reduction in prices, and I'll raise my hand and buy that house as soon as it's available. But you heard from Mr. Witkowski, you can hear from him again, that doesn't apply to small cells. And in fact, I know it's hard to believe, but homes that are adjacent to good, high-quality wireless service through small cells actually appreciate in value rather than depreciate in value. There's a concern about fire risk. There's no fire risk from this facility. There's no generator, no gasoline, nothing like that. It is getting a robust PG&E pole that's fully engineered by PG&E to make sure that it structurally can withhold excessive winds and everything else. And of course, wireless connectivity improves your safety in times of fire, as we've heard so many times. I mentioned the fiber already and the issue of the fiber. Rich Conroy did want to, there's some questions about his reports and perhaps his integrity. He'd like to respond quickly. Rich, are you still there? Can we bring up Rich Conroy? Oh, thank you.
Yes, I am, Paul, thank you.
Oh, we can see you, Rich.
Yes, just a couple of quick things. If I forget anything, remind me. One of the topics that came up was with respect to the Golden Bough and this issue with the trees. And I think what one needs to understand in radio frequency engineering is, yes, signal does penetrate through trees, but close-in trees, very close, are in the near field of the antenna. What that means is the antenna starts at a narrow beam and it extends its signal out and it spreads out as it gets further away. Trees located in a very close proximity to the antennas, which there would be if they're pointing in the southwest direction, have a significant impact. An example of that would be shining a flashlight and putting your hand in front of it. You're not going to have much light go beyond it. But if you tell someone to stand 8 feet across the room and shine the flashlight at them, it's going to spread. This particular field observation of the Golden Bough, which we performed, and we have photographs from the drone, demonstrate significant blockage by trees pretty much anywhere on that rooftop. There is 2 rooftops there. There's a lower rooftop on the western side and a higher rooftop. The lower rooftop may have been the initial analysis. Whether it's the lower rooftop or the higher rooftop, or we move further down away from the ridge line, there's going to be significant blockage in that southwest direction. If I flip back to the exhibit that I was using, answer some other questions regarding Verizon's design. This exhibit shows Verizon's existing layout. To the south is 002, and to the right is 005. That's what those sites are going to provide as a small cell when they are activated. They're not going to fill the gap in the center. They're not intended to. Small cells are not intended to cover a large area, but Verizon's design for small cells uses omnidirectional antennas to minimize handoffs between sectors to provide a better reliable service, and to do that in their mid-band frequencies. The mid-band frequencies currently are deficient in this area. That's adding new services, adding better services, and densifying their network. If you look at this diagram, and many of you are not RF engineers, only 2 RF engineers tonight, it's me and Lee Afflerbach, you could easily see that the proposed site is in the center of the gap area, and there's something curiously wrong with the Golden Bough. It is in existing coverage. We cannot point any antennas to the east, to the north, or the south because they're already covered with other sites, and even pointing to the northwest is mostly covered by downtown Carmel. So from a design perspective, it is in the wrong location. Yes, 2 blocks away. 2 blocks away is significant distance when you're dealing with the small cell. And now when we bring in the founder's location, the founder's location has pure line of sight. It's on an elevated area. That terrain drops off to the ocean. It covers across water. And if you do a point-to-point, it is line of sight, not hitting anything in between. And that creates this yellow area, which is interference. It's not coverage. It's not good coverage. It's interference causing sonar problems. This is a very complex topic. How do we eliminate that? We build a site that overcomes that low-level interference so users can maintain communications indoors and communicate. And a key factor that everyone is ignoring is this is a two-way system. There's a device that needs to communicate to a site and a site that communicates to the device. The device is the limiting factor. It only operates at 1/4 of a watt. And the closer it is to a site, the less power it uses. So it actually emits less RF energy with sites closer to it. The Golden Bough, being further away, would require all of those users to power their radios up to try to reach it. And through the trees, it's not even going to be feasible. So it's just going to increase the unreliability of the area. That's why the Golden Bough is not a viable solution. It never was considered a viable solution in any of PeerCon's reports. We pointed that out in a number of ways and a number of reasons why. Doing the field verifications further verified that it's not an appropriate solution. That combined with its inappropriate location further justifies that.
Thank you, Rich. You guys have been very patient. I appreciate it. I did want to say quickly, the commission rules, we read those on the website. They say they're a draft. We were told they were a draft. And so a little surprised about the 4-vote requirement this evening, but we understand that. And there are also other requirements in those rules which haven't necessarily been followed, but we appreciate the heads up on that. I want to conclude, I just want to clarify what Rich was saying. The phone can ramp up 1,000 times. So if you're next to a small cell, it's using very low wattage, but if it's 2.7 miles away from a site, it ramps up 1,000 times in the energy that it has to use in order to reach that cell tower. We're proposing slightly larger than a 2-foot antenna on top of an existing telephone pole that's going to rise about 10 feet above the existing telephone pole. There are thousands of these in the Bay Area, all over, in various high fire areas and elsewhere. And they're seen as a solution versus the 200-foot towers or 100-foot towers that have previously been installed. I recognize it seems that we're trying to bulldoze here, but we've been, over the many years, trying to work with Carmel to come up with a simple solution. We understand the position you're in tonight with the community, but appreciate you listening to our comments, remarks, and arguments, and reading our reports and paying attention to your assignments. So thank you very much. And I'll conclude.
Okay, thank you for your comments. You want to make one concluding comment?
Our attorney,
Come up.
R.L. Strauss, would like to make another comment, if possible, to the rebuttal about what the RF engineer was saying.
Okay, well, I'd ask you to limit his comments to 3 minutes.
Okay.
He's not online?
He's on the telephone. Is he muted?
Yeah, he needs to unmute himself.
We're, for Mr. Stroud or Mr. Campanelli?
Ariel Strauss. Ariel Strauss.
It's the 310 number.
Oh, it's a 310,
Yeah.
okay. Mr. Stroud, could you unmute yourself? If you're there? There he goes.
Hi, thank you. Yes, this is Ariel Strauss. Thank you. I want to, this is the Ninth Circuit has held in T-Mobile v. Anacortes and American Tower Corp v. San Diego that a locality is not compelled to accept advisor representation. And when it comes to considering alternatives, the city is not required to take the applicant's word that these are the best options. That's exactly what we're seeing here. Mr. Albrin says the photographer come and test some of the images, but those images aren't in the record. We're talking about a single image that was submitted a few days ago and a second image that was shown in the presentation today. Mr. Conroy speaks about close-in trees, but we've included photos in Mr. Beagle's report that show clear line of sight to antennas built further back on the side of the roof looking towards the desired coverage area. It's not rocket science, and I ask you to look at those photos we submitted. But I want to point out, I think, what's most important for the commission, which is it should refuse to allow Verizon to hide the ball or play whack-a-mole. An applicant is required under the city's checklist in item 15.1 to, quote, provide an explanation of the special exception request and applicable supporting data, information studies necessary for the city to evaluate the request, end quote. Verizon or Sequoia, they must comply with the checklist. They haven't done that. They're showing up today, raising a new argument, asserting various heights that can or can't work on that rooftop. Supposedly it's based on some data. We have none of that data. And I think the answer here is clearly to demand that Verizon comply with the checklist, comply with the process, and deny the application. Because the information we're presenting today, it's totally one-sided. There's no way to interrogate it. And if they want to appeal to City Council, let them. But I think that from the standpoint of the checklist and requirements before the Commission, I don't think it's unclear what needs to happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to close the public comments at this time. I think everybody's had plenty of opportunity to present their arguments for and against. And I'm going to open it up to the commission for their comments. Because of the nature of this, I'm going to ask who would like to go first. Oh, Commissioner Alburn, don't look the other way. Are you trying to get out of here? You sent an email with a new draft resolution. I was kind of confused about that. What was the purpose of that?
Well, thank you, Chair. Before I get into my comments, I'm still stuck on the comment about the $1 million worth of salary in the corner, and I'd like to request a raise.
Well, we're going to give you a 100% raise, but
Yeah,
you're getting zero, so
Yeah.
do the math.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'll continue. I'd first like to say how grateful I am truly for all the good work. The applicant, for sure, and your perseverance with the city, the staff, the residents, everyone responding to all of the questions. In truth, I would like the end of this evening to see the city and the applicant agree to some form of an extension to provide the applicant with a little bit more time to investigate some of the alternatives. Because I support staff's recommendation, Mr. Olander, to the way that it's proposed anyway, to deny the application. But my reasons are slightly different, and that's why I sent what I did today in my email. Mr. Olander, in his resolution in section 2, he left a lot of blanks, and the blanks had to do with the reasons that we would deny. And so I prepared a couple of slides. I promise I'll be as brief as I can. But they explain why I feel that I can't support the application, the way that it's written. But I also underscore, I would really like to see the city and the applicant come to some kind of an agreement to extend the time for this, so that, because I do believe that the city is very eager to find a solution. We're just not quite there yet. So, because based on what we've heard, this application still, it doesn't meet the threshold of support for the Planning Commission. First, there's this bit about the special exceptions, right? And in order to approve this application, the Planning Commission has to be able to approve these special exceptions. And so the first one, if we go down to A1, it talks about the effective prohibition, right? Yes, there might be a gap, right? A gap in coverage may exist. And I did take note that Mr. Conroy tonight, he spoke to indoor performance, gaps in indoor performance. He also spoke to increased reliability and in-building service, which I found noteworthy. But I do not believe that the application has shown that Carmelo Street is really the least intrusive of addressing the gap. PureCon, the applicant's own consultant, we have this supplemental report, right, number 2, where they talk about the RF modeling at the Golden Bough as a marginally acceptable alternative. That really stands out when this commission needs to approve 2 special exceptions. And the city's consultant, RF engineer, Mr. Offenbach, he independently confirmed through his own modeling, indeed, that the Golden Bough could possibly be an alternative. We all know that it would require fewer exceptions, meaning it's going to be less intrusive, meaning that Ninth Circuit standard about being less intrusive could be met. That, to me, is very important. Also, I'm not sure if it was Mr. Conroy, but PureCon acknowledged that this tree proximity question, further field testing might be needed, and we heard from the opposing attorney, Mr. Strauss, speaking to that and his differing point of view. So I just don't feel that definitively this burden of proving that there's an effective prohibition, I just don't believe that it has been met to the level that we need in order to grant a special exception for it. Then under number 2, we have to speak to failure to demonstrate material inhibition. And I don't, with respect, I don't believe that the applicant has made this case either. This standard, we have to consider everything in order to meet this as a planning commission, and that includes lack of alternatives. And I believe we've heard enough testimony from a variety of people, both from the city and from some of the resident professionals that have been hired, the consultants. I think we have heard that there are some alternatives that have not been completely addressed. This means that the remedy is going to exist within the applicant, yes? Going down to number 3, failure to demonstrate a violation of state law. We've heard and we know the city is well within its authority to prevent infrastructure placements that use that odd word, that incommode public use. But our own municipal code, do I have that there? I don't. I'll quote it for you. 1746-040E1. Our code doesn't prohibit infrastructure in the right-of-way, but in certain areas like this R1 area, it absolutely needs a heightened review. That's our responsibility up here as a planning commission. Now, I understand that the applicant has stated, and I've listened very carefully to this, states that if we deny this application, we're going to be violating its franchise under that Public Utilities Code, that section 7901. And I know from the history that the city has consistently spoken differently to that and rejected that. And that came through when we adopted our ordinance and also when this was addressed at the Coastal Commission. I'm going to skip past number 4 in the interest of time and go down to C here, the proposed use and its compatibility with surrounding land uses. Our general plan absolutely supports improved communications infrastructure, and this is where Mr. Olander and I have a slightly different interpretation of this finding. Yes, the general plan supports this infrastructure, but it doesn't require that we approve improvements that are at the expense of community character. 100%. This facility does, I believe, makes enough of a statement that it may provide adverse visual impacts and these are inconsistent with neighborhood character and absolutely inconsistent with our general plan preservation goals. I mean, that's why we're here. That's exactly why this planning commission is here. And then, so that was first. And then second, forgive me, but granting this proposal would absolutely set a precedent. Absolutely, not only for this town, but for other towns. And I think we have to pay really close attention to that and this kind of installation inside an R1 district. And so, for these reasons, under D, I don't think this proposed facility is going to meet our design review findings. So could we go to the next slide, please? So just quickly, the findings that this commission needs to meet, these are the ones that I believe it doesn't meet. Just to quickly go through and outline how I'm thinking. The first set of findings have to do with our municipal code section that addresses use permits. And the first finding we need to meet is that it's not going to conflict with our city's general plan. And this is a general plan conflict because it does appear that alternatives exist. And the general plan is going to prioritize community character over infrastructure. So that's the first. Second, will the proposed use comply with all zoning standards? We have to give it two special exceptions in order for it to comply with zoning standards. And I believe that these two special exceptions cannot be granted. The third line, granting that the use permit will not set a precedent. It absolutely is going to. I think approving a highly incompatible infrastructure in an R1 location is going to invite similar future applications. Next slide, please. Continuing with some of the use permit findings, talking about safety and public health and welfare. I agree with Mr. Olander how he interpreted the fall zone standard. However, I don't think that the Planning Commission can ignore the spirit of that standard, and placing a 50-foot structure 25 feet from a historic residence, I believe is a concern, and I would like to see a different approach to that. Number 6, this talks about land use compatibility. Again, in our code, R1 zones are designated as highly incompatible, and this directly fronts a historic resource. So I can't see that as, I can't say yes, that we can meet that finding given the R1 zone and given that we need to make two special exceptions. Number 7, I think this is a little soft, but I've included it. I do think that there's adverse neighboring impacts because of the structural proximity. And I do have a concern about the trench encroachment, but that to me is more of an engineering question that hasn't completely been answered. Next slide, please. So the next set of findings have to do specifically with wireless facilities. The number 1 talks about adverse visual impacts. I believe that this particular proposal is actually not compliant with our development standards, and I don't happen to agree that special exceptions are justified. The second, the applicant is requesting a special exception. Yes, but they fail because I do believe that both the Golden Bough Theater and a few other locations may actually provide some viable and less intrusive alternatives that would require fewer special exceptions. Next slide, please. Again, continuing with the wire facilities findings, we as a commission, all the findings must be found in order to approve a use permit, and because of all of these indications, these statements that I've just made, I don't believe those findings can be made. Number 8, I think the design review fails. We've talked about this, height and volume and so on, and also at the last, because we cannot meet the design review and the design guidelines, where that coastal development permit requirement is going to fail. The next slide, please. And for the special exceptions, the applicant has shown that denial of the application will result in an effective prohibition. I do not believe this is true, because I do not believe that we have had a complete justification that sites like the Golden Bough are actually the least intrusive alternative. And then the final finding that we need to make has to do with narrowly tailoring exceptions. And I believe that granting, as a planning commission, 2 special exceptions exceed what's necessary, given that there is the potential for viable alternatives. I'd like to conclude truly by saying, I'd like to ask the commission and the city and the applicant to seriously consider speaking to an extension for the shot clock, to provide ample time for the applicant to consider several remedies that are absolutely within their power. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Allen, would you like to speak? Yes, Commissioner Allen.
Okay, so well done. And I don't have much to add. I do have a few concerns in terms of shot clock situations, but honestly, I mean, you covered everything that I was going to say. So I don't really have anything else to add. I feel like granting this application is in direct violation of our code and our ordinance. So that's it for me.
Okay, Commissioner Karapetov?
Yeah, I would like to agree with everything Mel and Erin mentioned a minute ago. I just wanted to talk about the whole problem statement and the process, because there were a lot of comments about how did we come to this situation where we have one camp on the left dedicating so much resources to plead one way, and then we have another camp on the right dedicating a lot of resources to plead the opposite. So the first issue is, and I raised that in the questions earlier today, was that this design review is very narrow. We're being asked to approve or reject what I call is 1/4 of Plan B. For me, Plan A was to build this big tower in the south that would serve multiple service providers and provide big coverage. Plan B with the multiple small cells is a less efficient way to solve the problem in general. Small cells cannot cover the same area as a microcell. They also, as we heard, the poles, the PG&E poles, they don't have enough space. So you have to sacrifice radio technology. And we heard that instead of putting the entire set of radios, they just picked 2. They put 2 radios in that box. They had to make a compromise and reduce the efficiency of that system because they didn't have space. They had to get rid of backup power supply. We heard that too, as well, right? So basically, when there's a PG&E outage, this small cell is not going to work. So here's the whole thing about using mobile as emergency communication, right? It doesn't work. Now, also, with multiple small towers, you end up with all these additional cables that you need to pull across town, all these fiber optic cables that need to connect all these different areas. So you're putting additional cables to connect everything. So that has impact on aesthetics, in addition to the aesthetics impact from the tower itself. For me, this is, I wish as a planning commission, we would be looking at the bigger problem, that is, how do we improve mobile communication service in South Carmel? There is a problem in South Carmel with mobile communications. You know, when I talk to my neighbors, when I observe the way I use my mobile phone, we all turn off, we put our phones in airplane mode to connect to the Wi-Fi network at home so that we can use it as a phone, right? And then when you leave the house and you need to go to Crossroads to buy some groceries, you forget to switch off your airplane mode, so you don't get calls. Everything goes to your voicemail for a while, and then you realize it, and you disable it, and then you start receiving calls for a while, but then you go home and lose the signal again, so you have to go and switch it. So I think I do that maybe 5 times a day, just switching between airplane mode, Wi-Fi, and connecting to the service provider network. And that is not really a very smart way of spending our time. And a lot of calls end up in our mailboxes. The quality is not great. So in general, there is a mobile communication problem. But I don't agree with Verizon that the problem is capacity. I have never had a problem where I had coverage and I couldn't place a call. Even when we had outages and we had emergencies, big storms, I was always able to place a call, so the capacity was never a problem. The coverage is a problem, and that's why we switched the phone between airplane mode and not, right? That's a coverage issue. That's why we get 1 bar or 2 bars, not 3 or 4. So that is the problem I would like to solve. And my understanding is by having this big micro tower in the south, we will solve the coverage problem that we really have. Now, the tower, small towers, big towers, it's a classic infrastructure problem. Now, for those of you who live in houses built in the 50s, you have this tiny little utility room next to your living room where you have your water heater. Because that's the most efficient place to put your water heater. It's right in the middle of the house. You have shortest way to send warm water to the bathrooms, to the kitchen, etc. And it's efficient, right? It's the most efficient way. But is it the best way to put your water heater? It's not. That's why modern houses have their water heaters moved to the garage. It's a longer way. It may take a second or 2 or 3 to get the warm water to your sink, but you don't want to have your water heater right in the middle of the house. So here we have the same problem, right? Maybe there are technology benefits of the phone being close to the tower, but we don't want to have the tower in the middle of our house. We want to have it on the periphery. Even if it takes a couple of seconds for the warm water to come in or the signal to come in, that doesn't seem to be a problem for the community. Now, the timing and the process was criticized as well by some of the statements here. Now, I have the feeling we're always too late. The moment the problems come to the Planning Commission, 2-3 years has passed. Something happened like 4 years or 3 years ago that brought us to this point, and we just get the consequences. And we have to deal with the consequences, and there's never a good solution when you deal with consequences. Now, back in 2023, we're discussing the wireless ordinance, right here. We approved it in August. Exactly in that time, Verizon and a bunch of other companies were discussing building this tower in the south of town on the water treatment plant. But we didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. Nobody said anything about it when we discussed the ordinance. And then in July 2024, the board of directors of the California Wastewater District rejected the whole thing. And the main problem was that it was taking too much staff time to work on these contracts because there were like 3 parties involved, Verizon and a bunch of other companies, two other companies. One wanted to buy the land, the other one wants to build a tower. So there were like 3 different companies dealing with lawyers and with, salespeople, dealing with the water district. And at some point they said, this is enough. This is just like too much for us. And the money we're going to get out of this is just not worth it. So they just dropped the whole thing in July 2024. Now, that was exactly the time, 23 and 24, to have this discussion here and try to figure out how we as a city can support this initiative and what do we need to provide, maybe staff time, maybe money, maybe something to solve that problem the way it's supposed to be solved. But we missed that, and that was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and now we're dealing with the consequences. And my problem is really that we always seem to be getting this very complex, very controversial, very difficult issues when it's just almost too late to deal with them. And I'm always thinking like, okay, we know that right now PG&E is trying to solve the problem with redundant power so we don't have power outages, but we don't hear about it. We know that they're trying to do something down in Del Monte, right? There was an article in the Pinecone about that. But they talk about improving the service to Pacific Grove, not to Carmel. So now is the time to engage with PG&E, not 3 years from now when the decisions were made, the lines are, the trenches are there, the cable is there, everything is ready, and then somebody comes to us and says, now we want to put a big transformer in the middle of Carmel. That is too late, right? So we have this situation here where timing is an issue. I wish we would have this discussion right after we adopted the wireless ordinance, maybe in September or October 2023, and find an agreement with the wastewater district to build this giant antenna, because nobody cares, it's in the middle of nowhere, and let all the service providers go on and put their equipment there, and then we will not have this problem.
But we're here today. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
100%, just like my raise. But we're here today. So what do we do today?
Well, today it's.
What do we do today for this
I-
applicant?
Yeah.
For this application, right, for these conditions and for this proposal? What do you think the best way is forward for us, given everything that we've heard today?
I mean, it's.
Let me just make a comment here to get this focused. We have two resolutions with us tonight. We have one to approve, one to deny. Now, I'm just reading through the deny one. To make a denial, we have to make specific findings, and you did present specific findings. I appreciate a lot of what you're talking about, but I think we need to get our comments focused on the findings to either approve or deny. And those are specific findings, and I think those need to be in the context of what has been presented here tonight. The way our ordinance is crafted, most of it is based upon aesthetics. It has a lot to do with the character of the community.
True.
We have no legal authority to make any decisions based on radio frequency waves. We have very little authority to make decisions based upon what type of equipment they should use. Whether it be macro or micro deals. So really, I think it gets down to the arguments been made by Mr. Campanelli, where his argument is that the Golden Bough is a less intrusive site and therefore is more desirable. And then
It is.
and then the other argument that I think which has significance and was brought up in Commissioner Alborn's findings is the impacts on the historic building which the proposed site is right in front of.
Yes.
And also the special exceptions that have to be made. So I think really what we need to focus our comments on so we can get to a decision here is, whether or not the special exceptions have been met, whether or not the alternative site of the Golden Bough has been demonstrated to be a more desirable location, and whether or not the site has significant impacts on the historic building that's being proposed to be put in front of.
Chair, may I
Yes.
please? You're suggesting that, we have the two options, right? Either the approve or the deny. And my question is there a third option? Should the commission find itself leaning towards a denial based on the way that the application is currently presented? Is there a third option for the city to speak with the applicant about extending the shot clock to allow a little bit more time? I don't know, that's
Well,
a genuine question, I don't know. if
Yeah,
that's
the way I
possible.
understand it, we'd have to make a motion to continue it, but or I don't know how we'd have a conversation in this context to get an agreement from the applicant to extend it and then, therefore, the shot clock would stop. I don't know, does the director have an opinion about this?
Thank you. No, I think you're completely correct. If we were to continue, we would have to have an agreement with Verizon to extend the shot clock.
So I would caution against that approach. I would not want something to go awry there and run out of shot clock time.
Yeah, well, let's finish our discussion and we'll get more. I think what we need to do, once every commissioner makes their comments, then we'll talk about the two resolutions. And also there's the elephant in the room, and that is we have to have 4 commissioners that agree to whatever resolution is put forth with a motion and a second. So Commissioner Locke, you were you're second to last.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for your previous comments, commissioners. And thank you, staff, for the excellent staff report. There was a lot of time and a lot of effort put in to doing this. And I think it was deeply looked at, and I very much appreciate that. The thing that really stands out to me is at the January meeting, the statement was made that Verizon is looking to its future needs. And it's this project being driven by community demand and network development. Okay, so that right there, as I've been contemplating that, I think it's not so much about what's happening right now, but what is going to happen in the future of Carmel. I certainly think that the R1 district is an area that is extremely special to the residents and visitors, and that we want to do everything we can to protect our community in those areas. So, as was already mentioned, I kind of had taken this Lobos Ridge site and the fact that the attorney had said that it was decommissioned because of this conflict between the Pebble Beach site, or the Pebble Beach Tower, and then the Carmel Point, or the Lobos Ridge site. And then today I'm hearing that's not the case. The other thing that wasn't ever mentioned is the cell service or cell tower, whatever facilities they are, that are on the beach club, which are actually closer to Carmel than what we were talking about with the other location in Pebble Beach, and whether or not that can be strengthened in any way to perhaps help fill in this gap. I absolutely believe that there has not been enough of a response to using the Golden Bough, that there is certainly a possibility to, one, the height issue was brought up, tree issues. You can always trim trees and window trees to create something that wouldn't block the immediate. I mean, I understand the concept of putting your hand up in front of a flashlight and you can't get around it, but you can always window that so that you can get through that. And then the concern about not activating the Carmel Point sites, that really blows my mind that we have this issue, which again today, something else we learned is that the fiber optic lines, it's not because you can't get fiber optic lines now, it's now because there's encroachment permit problems with the county. And that was what I heard you say. And that encroachment permits, I don't believe, have to go to a hearing. And it's the county, not the city, so just FYI. It's the city. Okay. So those are really my concerns about that. Now I'm going to go deeper into my comments about the facility that's proposed. Again, the coverage service, I don't think it's proven that there's a significant gap in that area. I have not had that personal experience, and I think he's got a bigger problem with cell service in the neighborhood down by the Mission than maybe they do down on Carmelo. But anyway, so the volume of the facility, the shroud or the cabinet area, in my mind, I think the space between the pole and the cabinet is space, and it should be counted as volume. In particular, when you've put, even with these blinders or whatever you called them on there, it's space taken up that is space taken up, and I would count that area. Let's see. As far as calling it a stealth site, honestly, I think that you're painting it the color of the pole. That does essentially camouflage this cabinet, and as long as the cabinet meets the volume requirements, to me, that would not be something that I would say, I would say that would meet a camouflage area. Landscaping, it's not a new pole, repeat that, it is a replacement pole. And I mean, I do understand the concerns, but it is a replacement pole. If it goes up above the existing height, that's allowable. There was a comment about being able to shave off 6 inches or something if necessary to comply with the height requirement. That would be something I would absolutely require. One comment was that when they went out on February 4th to look at the pole, and I believe PG&E was there, Verizon was there, City was there, and the Forester, there was no comment about the grounding pole that has to go into the ground next to the new pole for the Verizon facility, which is not PG&E. So Verizon is actually going to be digging deeply, and I believe it was something like 8 feet down to put in this, there's a metal grounding pole that was in the plans that we saw last month. Anyway, that was not discussed. The historic site, I think I agree with staff's comments on that. The window setback, there's a pole in front of the window right now. I don't think that having this stuff up above is going to be a significant issue, although I do have a problem with the selection of that pole being where this equipment's planned. And then, I think the superior location question is Golden Bough, and that it needs to be looked at further, that it does appear to be potentially a better site. So those are my comments.
Okay. I think we have to deal with the issue of four commissioners have to vote the same to get this passed. It sounds to me like we don't have that. And I'm just, just informally, you can correct me if I'm wrong, sounds like Commissioner Alborn is not supporting this and she's prevented findings, so forth. Commissioner Allen is not supporting this. She's in agreement with the findings that Commissioner Alborn presented. Mr. Locke, it seems to me the finding primarily you felt that didn't meet it was the least intrusive site in the Golden Bough. And Commissioner Karapetkoff, you feel that the site is not the least intrusive, correct? I mean, I don't want to characterize things but if you have, because these are findings that we need to make specifically. So, and I'm also in agreement. I think that the Golden Bough needs to be further explored to provide proof that it is not the best site. And I'm also feel that there is significant impacts on the historic building by the way that the equipment is set up in this site. So we have a resolution to deny, and we are required to make findings to deny that. I think we can easily do that in the context of the slides that Commissioner Alborn has presented for staff. So my question is to staff, do you feel that the adequate findings have been made so that you understand the resolution to deny?
The only thing staff would ask is if the planning commissioners can deliberate on the findings that Commissioner Alborn has provided, and make sure that there is agreement amongst the entire commission, as it'll be adopted by the entire commission.
You'll have to put up the slides again then.
We could do that, and then also the slide that's currently on, not that one. This slide kind of tees up the.
This is from staff?
This would be for
Right.
section 2, right?
Section 2.
Right, and if I could suggest, Jake, are you able to pull up the red line document That has the tables for the findings that I was suggesting that are slightly different from yours. You know, the yes/no tables? And it lists all of them. And the reason why I feel that those are important is because I think that they're reflecting, the yes/no checkboxes are reflecting a little bit more closely the opinions of the commissioners, but we can, of course, discuss this.
Before we do that, though, can we just go over what staff has presented?
Of course.
And then we'll, okay, so, these are the findings that staff wants made. The applicant has failed to show that the denial of the application will result in an effective prohibition of service under the significant gap least intrusive means test. I think that the location of the Golden Bough suggests that there is a site that is less intrusive. That's a finding.
Yes.
Agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the applicant has failed to materially inhibit standard because, considering the totality of the circumstances, including the codes,
Excuse me,
that is a
Chair,
good-looking
for-
moose, including the code city sightings and other more, this, once again, the Golden Bough Theater needs to be, it presents itself as a less intrusive site. And that
sir,
also has to do with in the context of the impacts on the historic building and the equipment that's proposed. And the applicant has not shown that denial would violate state law because Verizon has failed to show that the heightened review in the code for facilities in the R1 zone right-of-way violates the applicant's statutory franchise in public use of right-of-way. That one, I think you had a specific, part of that is that in our approval process, we have the tiered system. The R1 is the least desirable.
Correct.
So I think that they have not demonstrated that, this application is the least desirable, which is supported by, it needs to have special exceptions.
Agreed, but could we please go up to the first one? The applicant has failed to show that denial would result in effective prohibition. I have a question about the second sentence in red and the veracity of that. It's stating rather specifically, the macro rooftop facility at the Golden Bough would address the coverage gap and would not require any code exceptions. I don't know that we can actually state that.
May.
Yes, I think we need some
Yeah, I don't think
adjustment
we
to
should
that
put
language.
definitive language in there. I think our position is that they have failed to provide adequate actual data that it wouldn't provide the gap coverage. They have provided some speculative reasons, the tree, I think the tree being the most, compelling argument they've made, although there could be some, the size of the roof, trimming to the tree could mitigate that. So I think we need to, the macro rooftop facility at the Golden Bough may address the coverage gap.
Correct.
And may not require any code
Correct.
exceptions.
Right.
And then also in the second red paragraph, in the parentheses, the Golden Bough Theater, I think that should read as an example, or for instance, comma, the Golden Bough Theater. Again, we cannot state definitively their technology, right?
To the chair, just to clarify.
Oh, excuse me. That second red paragraph, considering the totality of the circumstances, including the code citing preferences and requirements, another more compliant location may be technologically and economically feasible and potentially available.
Yes.
That's the denial, yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay.
To the chair, just to clarify, for the first one, last sentence would be strike out the words would address and would not require, and replace with may address.
Yeah, we want to
or
put
not.
may, replace would with may.
And then the
In two places on that sentence. And I would actually start the sentence with a instead of the.
And do we even know that it would be a macro
Yeah,
facility?
exactly.
Why are we
Any
even
facility.
stating that?
I would just say a rooftop
why-
facility.
Yeah, just take out the macro.
Okay. Okay.
Okay? And
Two
Now, on number 2, do you need the words there?
would be which one?
On number 2,
Was to change it.
okay.
yeah, take out the word is, put may technologically,
This
not going to be
Okay.
feasible and potentially available.
Maybe.
Another more
Thus, the
compliant
denial will-
location such as the Golden Bough Theater.
Such as.
Is compliant the right word? Okay.
No.
No, wait a second,
I
okay.
don't think compliant is the correct,
No.
Either.
I don't think that's the correct descriptive.
I would just say another location such as
Yeah.
the Golden Bough Theater is technologically.
May,
Or an
may be
alternative,
Cross out
don't
more
we use the
compliant.
word alternative throughout the application?
Yeah.
So maybe alternative. is
Alternative
the word.
location.
Alternative location, another
May be
alternative.
technologically and economically feasible.
Yeah.
I hope you can read my writing.
And you can leave in, thus the denial will not materially inhibit,
Maybe tech.
because that's a specific finding.
Yes.
So are you okay with the language on the last one?
I would change the word Verizon to the applicant has failed to show.
Okay.
Or demonstrate, or whatever.
Do you have a question about the second?
Demonstrate.
We good?
Ooh, two.
All right. I don't think we need to go any further than that,
Yeah.
unless you have something specific you want to add to it.
Not here, but I would like to review the check boxes, the yes and no in the findings.
Okay.
Um,
This is in the
So
municipal code findings?
comparing just a quick comparison of my red line to the.
So let me just read them off.
The draft.
Okay, so one is the proposed use will not conflict with the city general plan.
I believe
think
the
we say
answer
no.
is no.
Change the yes to no. That the proposed use will comply with all zoning standards applicable to that's a no.
That's a no.
The granting of the use permit will not set a precedent.
That's a no. It will absolutely select.
We say
set
no?
precedent. Yes, that's a no.
That the proposed use will not make excessive demands on the
That's a yes.
provision of public services, including water, sewer capacity, energy, communications, facilities, police protection, fire protection.
That remains yes.
That stays yes.
Okay. 5, that the proposed will not be injurious to the public, safety, or welfare.
Because of that fall zone, I think that should be a no.
Okay, no.
Do people agree
That the
with me?
proposed, 6, that the, are you guys keeping track of this? Okay.
Follow the slides.
All right. That the proposed use will be compatible with surrounding land uses and will not conflict with the purpose established for the district within which it is located.
No. We can't make that finding.
No, okay. That the proposed use will not generate adverse impacts affecting the health, safety, or welfare of the neighboring properties or uses.
That's a no.
Should be a no. Okay, these are municipal code. The proposed wireless facility will not result in adverse visual impacts or have an adverse impact on property values because it complies with all applicable development standards.
Well, that's a.
That's a no.
That's a no.
If applicable to the extent of the proposed wireless facility does not comply with all applicable development standards and the administrative detailed wireless facility design guidelines, the applicant has requested a special exception and the findings for granting special exceptions pursuant to subsection C of this section can be made. That's a no.
That's a no.
Proposed wireless will comply with all applicable FCC regulations and guidelines of human exposure to RF emissions and will not either individually or cumulatively with other transmitters in the vicinity result in RF exposures. That's a yes.
That's a yes.
Proposed wireless facility will not comply with all applicable, public safety standards.
That's a yes.
Yes. The proposed wireless will comply with all fall zone requirements. That's a yes.
That's a yes.
All public notices required for the applicant have been given. Yes.
That's a yes.
All the findings required for use permit pursuant to municipal code. I'm not going to read it out. It's a yes.
No, that's a no, actually.
That's a no?
We can't-
What is it? All,
We can't make those findings.
all right, do you have that one called out?
Yes. Did you
6410.
want- Did you want some details?
All right, no. All findings for discretionary design approval pursuant to conform to applicable policies, general, that's a no,
That's a no.
if I'm agreeing with you. Comply with all applicable provisions of this code, no. Are consistent with applicable adopted design review guidelines,
No.
no. If applicable, all findings required for the coastal development permit,
That's a no.
no. Project is, as described in the application and accompanying materials as modified by any conditions of approval, conforms with the certified city of Carmel-by-the-Sea local coastal plan.
Well, that doesn't apply. We're not between the
Doesn't
the
apply?
sea and the first road. Yeah.
So we leave it a yes, or it's an NA?
I think that's an NA.
What's staff's opinion?
The second, part 2 of number 9.
It would be an NA.
Pardon?
If it is not in the appeal.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. If the project's located between the first public road and the sea, the project conforms with public access recreation policies of Chapter 3. I think that's a yes.
That's a NA.
Huh?
That's a NA.
That's, well, yeah, I mean, if it did, NA is fine, okay. Municipal code findings,
Now we're down to
CMC
special
section
exceptions.
1746080C, special exceptions, no, first one. 2, special exceptions requested by the applicant does not compromise or excuse compliance with any fire safety or public health
That's a yes.
safety requirements.
That's a yes.
Okay. Special exception is narrowly tailored such that any deviation from the requirements of this chapter is only to the extent necessary for compliance with federal or state law to achieve all applicable design objectives of this chapter, as well as better than would be achieved.
That's a no because
That's
of
a
the
no.
alternative.
Right.
Possible alternatives. And that's
Okay.
it. That's it.
To the chair, just
Yes.
to clarify, the reasons that are summarized on the slides for supporting all the no answers, I just want to verify that the commissioners all are agreeable with that language.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I will make a motion for the resolution to decide based on those findings.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Alborn?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Carapecca?
Yes.
Commissioner Locke?
Yes.
And Chair LePage?
Yes, motion is carried. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, we,
Yeah, exactly.
I think that concludes our agenda. All right. Our next meeting is tomorrow night. We'll see you all then. We're adjourned. Oh, it's coming. It's coming. It's going to arrive digitally. Yeah, we got through it. Oh, man. Really?